Merciful Father, I have squandered my days with plans of many things. This was not among them. But at this moment, I beg only to live the next few minutes well. For all we ought to have thought, and have not thought. All we ought to have said, and have not said. All we ought to have done, and have not done. I pray thee, God, for a podcast.
That's good.
For forgiveness, right?
Correct.
That's what he's, yeah.
Correct. I liked it because it talked about saying stuff and not saying stuff. And at the end of the day, isn't that what podcasting's about?
I was also thinking you could include, like, when he's introducing himself with all of his names and who, the lineage. You could have slipped podcast into
Look,
that. But
doing,
yours was
doing the
better.
accent felt gamey to begin with. I don't think I also want to do Antonio Banderas with a Spanish accent listing Muslim names.
Yes.
Right. Well,
I consider doing the tagline for this film. Do you know what the tagline for this film is?
go ahead.
An ordinary man, ... An extraordinary journey.
Wait, he's not ordinary.
No.
The plot of 13th Warrior is not like some Joe Schmo got mixed up with a bunch of Vikings. Like, he's extraordinary.
An extraordinary journey with the exclamation point too makes it sound like this movie is like Star Kid or something.
It's very fun. It's an adventure for the whole family.
But also look at, this is, we'll talk about, a few movies have gotten dumped harder than this one. But this poster that comes out with this bastardized title, right? The tagline's like an afterthought. Antonio Banderas in huge letters,
yes.
then almost equally large letters from the author of Jurassic Park and the director of Die Hard.
That's what they had.
Right.
So they really leaned on that.
And then the pull quote is just exhilarating exhilarating adventure thriller, Entertainment Weekly.
Which was like the one A+ review from Lisa
Schwarzbaum loved it.
Yeah.
But also that quote sounds more like a description of what the film is trying to be than even praise.
Completely. Yeah. It's just a literal description of something you will experience perhaps.
There is
while watching the
exhilarating
movie.
action, adventure, thriller.
There's two posters. One says, you know how below the credits,
yes,
it'll be like X on this date. So one says Fear Reigns, August 13th.
Okay.
Fear from, the bean counters in Hollywood.
they were terrifying.
And the other one says Defy Fear, October 28th. So I guess these are two. This must.
What was the original release date? Does it say anywhere?
It was 1998.
We'll talk about it.
Okay,
I think it must be in our dossier because because
at what point does marketing go from be afraid to defy fear?
No,
I ain't scared of you, motherfuckers.
I'm looking at this poster you're talking about, David. It's interesting also that the shift is like now on this one from the author of Jurassic Park and the director of Die Hard is bigger than Banderas' name, almost bigger than the title. And then the tagline is almost hidden. This poster sucks. The one that's just his eye and the boat.
Yeah.
It's kind of evocative, but it's not the kind of poster where I'm like, I gotta see Antonio Banderas' eye in a boat, I guess.
No. It is a great poster for a movie called The 13th Warrior, and
that's kind of a good teaser poster.
Finish your thought, David.
Oh, it's not a good poster for a movie that should have definitely still been called Eaters of the Dead.
Yeah.
Which is a great title.
Yeah.
Why didn't they call it Eaters of the Dead?
In the dossier.
Okay, we'll get to that.
Yeah, I'm excited to find out.
Let me answer just because there are a lot of thoughts on it. But the anecdote that is told is that like Michael Crichton was watering his lawn, and his next door neighbor was like, "So, any more movies coming out of your books?" And he's like, "Yeah, one of my early books they're making out, Eaters of the Dead." And he's like, "What is that? Some sort of B horror monster
it sounds
movie?"
like a zombie movie or whatever.
And
sure.
Crichton turned around, called Disney, and was like, "We need a classy title. My neighbor thinks it sounds schlocky."
And I can see that, but at the same time, I'm like, your book is called Eaters of the Dead.
Yeah.
You're selling everything on the fact that you write bestsellers. Maybe we should use the title of your book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, Eaters of the
Occam's
Dead.
Razor,
a rad as hell title.
Yeah, it's
13th
cooler.
Warrior is nothing.
Well, what if there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12 warriors?
That's the unluckiest warrior.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like it's going to be about an unlucky warrior. And it's like, is that what it is? It's like, no, there were 12. He's the 13th.
Right. If it was Leslie Nielsen as the 13th warrior, I'd be like, sounds funny.
Boy, this guy's going to fall off the boat.
Yeah.
He's got his little fart machine, like when they're having their important
They're
Viking
in the
meetings.
cave,
And
they're like, wait, what do I smell? Like,
We've talked about how Leslie Nielsen's gravestone just says "Let her rip."
Yes.
Does it?
Yeah.
Yes, it
Oh,
does.
priceless.
I mean, there are multiple stories of other celebrities meeting Leslie Nielsen and him activating a whoopee cushion or fart machine that he had on his person.
Never left home without it.
Right, like literally.
And he would do it in like interviews.
And he'd be like,
That's where I discovered it was all the
Yes.
interviews, and that is incredible to watch. It's masterful.
this is Blank Check. Go ahead.
But this is Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
It's a podcast about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. Sometimes those checks clear and sometimes they bounce, baby. Today we are talking about, and these, it's hard to prove these things with Hollywood accounting and such. This, by some accounts, is the biggest money loser in the history of Hollywood.
I feel like this movie was in record books at a certain point.
At the
Yes.
time, I think it was definitively given that title. Now, only 2 movies have maybe surpassed it.
I think it's now also hard.
But adjusted for inflation, it maybe beats them.
Yeah.
Can you name the 2 movies that most people cite as losing more money than this film?
Since this movie, or
Yeah, they're both in the last
Pluto
10
Nash?
years.
No, okay. 'Cause
Bigger.
I remember that was a big one, obviously.
They're 2 huge Disney flops, failed franchises.
John Carter?
Correct?
Yeah.
Is by most accounting number 1.
And okay, Disney.
Mhm.
Why? I feel like this is obvious, and I'm not thinking
Tomorrowland?
of it.
Tomorrowland's in the top 10.
Makes sense.
not
Yeah,
Alice.
I mean,
Alice
RIP.
2 probably is up there, but not
I
that
think
one.
it made some money.
it?
Those
A
Depp
little bit.
movies would kind of clear
Well,
it.
but what's the one that costs so much?
Lone Ranger?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
most
But
people.
it's not so much that it costs so much, it's that it bombed so definitively as well.
Yeah, but it also costs so much.
Yeah. Well, they had like a train.
And
or
famously
whatever.
cost like more and more and more, where they're like, Disney was
Correct.
like, we will not greenlight this movie unless you hit this number. And then
Yeah.
they were like, we hit it, and then they greenlit it, and then they instantly went past it.
Correct. But yeah, this might be the greatest loser of all time. This is a mini-series on the films of John McTiernan. Today we are talking about The 13th Warrior.
Yes. What's the miniseries called?
It's called Pod Hard with a Venge Cast.
Good.
It had to be.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
This is one of the few where you could have just called it podcast and gotten away with it.
We could, in the big red
Yeah.
letters.
Yeah, that would have been nice, actually.
Yeah.
I'm just looking. All right, so like full disclosure, we're recording this episode out of order, and it is our first McTiernan.
We got a great
McTiernan
guest
episode.
returning
He's
to the
in
show
town.
after far too long absent. And so we're recording this one far in advance to take advantage of him being here, running the marathon. How are your legs feeling?
My legs feel great.
David Lowery's here, the great David
What was your
Lowery,
time?
friend of the show.
3 hours and 49 minutes.
Director of The Green
That's
Knight.
really good.
I felt
Ghost Story.
I felt pretty good about it.
That's really good.
That's impressive.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Last podcast hero.
Yeah, none of the other. I mean, just Die Hard with a Vengeance is one of the best titles ever.
It's
It
quite
really
good.
is. They really. That's the era of you can't just put a number on it anymore.
Correct.
Like Batman Forever.
Yes.
Like everyone just trying to be like, how do we solve the sequel title?
And it didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It was
and
pre-colon.
shush it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there were very few titles with colons at that
Colon's
point.
too fancy.
Yeah.
Who do you think you are? No. Next Karate Kid. I'm trying to think of other titles like that.
But it also somehow the title invokes the spirit of the movie, which is like McTiernan is back.
There's
This
a real
is kind of like
punchiness
the
to it.
proper Die Hard sequel. Die Hard 2 was Die Hard on a plane. This one is new Gruber, original director. We're dying hard with a vengeance.
New
you know?
Gruber. That's a great term.
New Gruber. New Gruber, new rules.
The Podmas cast affair.
Yeah, well, looks like we have to change our plans. No, it's Pod Hard with a Venge Cat. There's no
Pod Hard with a Venge cast.
there's no equivocating on this.
I'm not equivocating at all. I'm thrilled with our title, and I'm thrilled we're doing John McTiernan. But it is funny that we are beginning with the movie that exploded his career into smithereens.
Correct.
Not that he didn't then make more movies.
Yeah.
But it is the end of him as a successful filmmaker. Correct.
The Lunatics, correct. Well, we'll
It's
get into
3
it.
flops in a row.
Did he do what was between Die Hard with a Vengeance and this?
The Thomas Crown affair.
Wait, I thought that
That's a
was
hit.
after.
No, this is before. That's before. Well, they
Well,
come out
this
the
is the
same
thing.
year.
Yeah,
So I guess he made it after.
he made
Thomas-
it after and
yes.
it came out before.
It came out before.
This
It's so weird.
he makes Thomas Crown when he's basically washed his hands of this movie.
Yes.
And Crichton's taken over and the studios have taken over. And then Thomas Crown comes out 3 weeks before
It's like
this
late
movie.
July, and this is early August.
First week of August, last week of August. They're in the same month. It's my question, not to spoil anything, but when we get to the box office game, I'm so curious to see, because Thomas Crown was like a sleeper and it lingered.
We'll talk about it.
They both have to be in the top 10 at the same time.
We'll talk about it.
Okay, we'll talk about it.
But right, I guess you're right that he does. It's not like making this movie saps him of all his energies, because he makes Thomas Crown right after, and it's a great
It's successful
film.
and well regarded.
He would have been beyond cooked if
Right.
this came out.
But it's because he has that he can then make two.
And
more
that Thomas
movies that
Crown
don't
is
work.
doing well in theaters at the same time, where they're like, look, 13th Warrior just lost so much money, but the movie he made after that is making a profit for a different studio. The guy hasn't totally lost it.
But then Rollerball and
Basic.
Right, that kills him.
Rollerball kills him. Basic didn't do well, but Rollerball is the
Yeah.
true bomb.
Right,
Yeah.
because they still gave him a big budget for Rollerball. And then that's another, this is held for years. It's constantly reshot and recut. A fascinating career. The scoundrels and perverts on Letterboxd saw you log this movie, Sims.
Yeah.
And said, McTiernan confirmed. And they were like, first of all, David just watched this shit. Second of all, what possible reason would they have for starting with 13th Warrior?
Well,
If you were logging any other McTiernan movie, we'd think it was confirmed, and this might just be David on some weird shit. But I messaged you, Lowery.
Yes.
You were coming into New York to do the marathon,
Yeah.
and I said, we should get you on an episode. We're doing McTiernan, and your response was, I think, I want to get the exact quote here. 13th Warrior is something I talk about with odd frequency for a movie I haven't seen since it opened.
And this is true.
have you had this experience, Griffin? Because I have.
Mm.
I have mentioned this movie to a couple of people since we decided on this podcast.
Sure, privately in confidence.
And they have said, like, oh yeah, love 13th Warrior. And I mean, I would be like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, I saw it when I was a kid and it was kind of cool. Haven't seen it since. It's not good? Have you had that
I
experience?
haven't had one person say that. to me.
Two separate people like, oh yeah, 13th Warrior. That movie's fun.
Can you dox them? Can you name them on my?
I would never. I did expose them like that. But I wasn't even mad at them. I was just sort of like, wait, have you seen it recently? And they're
Yeah.
like, no. I have like a memory of seeing that on TV when I was 12 years old and it having like swords and shit. Like, and I had a good time watching
That's
it.
so
I'm
weird.
I'm so fascinated by I was like, what is this movie's cultural footprint
Yes.
at all? Like, am I the only person that ever thinks about it? And I will
Well-
talk about why I do, but I do.
Okay, well, I want to know why you
I'm very
think
curious.
about it.
I just want to introduce another plot thread for this episode.
Go ahead.
We have producer Ben Frisch filling in for Ben Hosley. Had to miss this recording.
Hey guys.
Great friend of the show.
Yes.
Doing us a real solid here. Ben, you went into this recording thinking that this was a different movie.
Yeah. So when I was asked to come in, I thought that this was going to be the movie Warriors of Virtue.
Warriors of Virtue.
In my
Yes.
head, I'd heard
Which
you guys.
I also think about a lot.
Yes.
I-
I may have to watch Warriors. of
I need to
Virtue
watch
now.
Warriors of Virtue.
I,
Yeah.
I heard you guys talk about this movie at some point,
Uh-huh.
and I just remember thinking, like, geez, John McTiernan's career must have taken a really strange turn.
To do the kangaroo movie.
Right.
Yeah, so I looked it up yesterday,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, oh, this is a totally different movie than what I was thinking. And so then I went down a rabbit hole trying to figure out what
What you were
Warriors
thinking of. right.
Virtue was, and had to search for movies with virtue in the title, and eventually
Right.
I found it, and through like Warrior and then Kangaroo People.
Yes.
It's a fantasy film about a
Animatronic
child.
kangaroo people who represent the elements. It was funded by a Chinese toy company. I wonder, David, if the people who are saying to you, I love the 13th Warrior, are making this same mistake.
You never know.
Because there were swords and shit in Warriors of Virtue as well.
Yeah.
Have you seen Warriors of Virtue?
I've seen it theatrically when it came out.
I thought you were about to say it. I've seen it many times.
No, yeah, it's another like 13th Warrior. I haven't seen it since it came out, but
But you think
I
about it
often
a
am
lot.
like, was that a real movie? And
Yeah.
I'll just YouTube the trailer just to confirm that yes, it was.
It's just because it's like Ronnie Yu obviously is like a big Hong Kong director in the 80s.
Is that his first English language
It's his
film?
first thing. Obviously, it's sort of like that's a movie with one foot in both
Yes.
Hong Kong and Hollywood or whatever. And then he does Bride of Chucky, The 51st State, which no one remembers,
No.
but it's kind of fun.
The Bride of Chucky rips.
It's
Bride of
pretty
Chucky's
good.
great. And then Freddy vs. Jason, which
Right.
is like great,
Got some good
stupid
stuff in it,
fun.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then Fearless. Okay, that's him sort of going back to
Right.
having one foot in each
He
country.
was supposed
Yeah.
to make Snakes on a Plane originally.
probably would
He
have
would've
been
been
better
great.
pick
Yeah.
for it. Yeah. Why didn't he?
I don't know.
The 51st State.
But that
which-
is why Samuel Jackson signed on for Snakes on a Plane
he was a
originally.
work
I
with
like
him.
Ronnie.
He's
right.
on set for 51st State, and he's like, "What are you working on next, Ronnie?" And he's like, "This movie, it's called Snakes on a Plane, but they want to change the title." And he's like, "I'll do it if they don't
yeah,
fucking
of course.
change."
They were
the
going to call it like Flight 82.
Correct.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The equivalent of the 13th Warrior.
It's
Yes.
just so funny
Yes,
that
yes, that's exactly the mistake they make on
Yeah.
this movie.
like that there was this movie, there's sort of like American British movie where they were like, who do people really want to team up right now?
Sam
Samuel
Jackson
Jackson and Robert Carlyle. But guess who's wearing the kilt? Sam is. Because that's the whole thing of the movie is he's wearing a kilt for some reason.
And they're like drug chemists.
yeah, they come up. I think it's like Carlyle maybe comes up with some formula for a new drug or something.
Because that's also a movie that had two different titles. I think it was released
It was called
in the
Formula
States.
51 in America because no one in America knows the joke of Britain being the 51st state,
Sure.
I guess was the thinking.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that is obscure because I did not know that.
Yeah, that's a British joke. I don't.
Wait, so Ben, did
Very
you
funny.
you saw Warriors of Virtue
Yes.
when it came out?
Yeah.
And it's haunted you.
I remember it being a movie I was scared to watch as a child because I was scared of a lot of movies. And characters in costume, like mascot characters and stuff, like the Easter Bunny always scared me as a kid.
And these are
Easter Bunny's
particularly scary looking creatures.
Yeah, they're kind of
Unintentional.
anthropomorphized kangaroos. And I remember being scared of it and then watching it and then just thinking that it sucked. And actually, it was fine.
Well,
It wasn't scary.
Yeah.
Ben, here's the quickest version of what 13th Warrior is.
Okay.
Right,
It
because
is-
you haven't watched it.
No.
Right.
It is Antonio Banderas playing a real Muslim man who exists, who
Yes.
was a writer, basically a travelogue writer, not to diminish his
He
accomplishments.
was his accounts of his travels survive.
At,
Yeah,
so
at that
from
time,
the
travel
10th
logs
century.
were important.
Right.
Right. You know. But
And
yes.
Antonio Banderas is playing him, right? This guy's real. His texts survive. He did different sort of Anthony Bourdain. Now I'm going to spend some time embedded with the Vikings. I'm going to go here. I'm going to do this. Michael Crichton in the 70s writes a book where he combines that character with Beowulf.
It's like, what if when that guy was traveling around, he hooked up with some Vikings and they were like, we're going to go fight Grendel?
He ended up being part of the Beowulf
Right.
mission.
Like if
But
if Marco Polo was also like fighting dragons. or
Correct.
something.
Yes, but it's got kind of the Crichton-y, like, but I'm going to make it more grounded. It won't be monsters. It will be like monstrous
It's like
people.
what gave birth to the myth?
Right. What was
Right.
the actual thing they were fighting? if
She's
it
not a
was not a
snake
monster?
lady. She's a lady who hangs out with a lot of snakes.
Yes.
Right.
Like,
and
truly.
it's an early Crichton work, right?
It's his fourth
It's
book.
his fourth book, but he was already a big deal.
Yeah.
Because Andromeda Strain and Terminal Man, I think, were like big books out of the gate, right? Like he's
already directing movies at this point by the time the
Yeah.
book comes
And
out.
he had written books under a different name as
Right,
well.
that's the other thing.
he
had, like-
wrote a bunch of.
Yeah.
Have you read those?
I've read none.
This
Have you
is
read any
the
Crichton?
fourth Crichton by name book.
So I've read. I was really into Congo when I was a little kid,
Congo kind of.
That makes
I love
so
that
much
book.
sense.
and then I know I read Jurassic Park, but it's so mixed up in my memories of the movie that
Same.
the movie kind of
Well,
surpassed it.
I famously had to put my Jurassic Park book under the bed because it scared me
Scared
so
you too
much. Yes.
So I read Eaters
Which
of the
I
Dead.
think about all the time that I was just like under the bed. And then like months later I found it and I was like, right, this had to go under here. Okay, I'm sorry. Finish your you read Eaters
I read
of the
Eaters
Dead.
of the Dead yesterday.
Oh,
Whoa.
in
Wow.
a day? How long is it?
Not only in a day,
You
I
also
read it
ran the marathon
read it
yesterday.
at
It's only
the,
288
at
pages.
the Marathon
All right.
Village. So you get to you take the bus to
You're going to Staten
Fort
Island.
Worth. Yeah,
Right,
and
yeah.
and then you just have to wait to start. And the book was short enough that I read the entire thing while waiting to start the marathon.
Olympic Village, famously horny. Marathon Village, famously people reading Crichtons.
Forgotten Crichtons, yes.
Well,
thumbs up, thumbs down.
It is generally a thumbs up. It is
Yeah.
exactly the movie.
Okay.
Like to the
Interesting.
point to where I'm like,
How did
I'm
they
already
fuck this up?
I'm already
Right.
curious how, like, what Crichton did when he took over as a director, like
Yeah.
what his reshoots were, and I've got ideas. But reading the book, I was like, this is pretty much just scene for scene exactly what's on screen. There's very little that is different.
The other, citing this movie alongside John Carter, right, and the scale of Disney flops. All three movies I cited produced by the Walt Disney Company at different eras.
True. This, of course, was a touchstone.
Correct.
Sure,
Released
yes.
under touchdown.
I mean, they're always touching stones in this movie.
Constantly.
Very true.
This is a very rocky
Hands,
movie.
feet,
Yeah.
blood's touching stones,
Yeah.
stones touching blood. You read about the production of this movie, and it feels like the type of production that then doesn't happen until 2011, 2012, and then becomes a pox upon the industry.
Yeah.
Where they basically shoot the movie 3 times, where they just like don't like it, and rather than let it go, are just like, we're starting over again. And so this is a movie that's basically greenlit at like $80 million and then ends up costing somewhere
that.
closer to
Like
I think
160.
I think it's greenlit at like 60. It then goes over budget to 80 in original production and then ends up costing somewhere between 160 and 180 in total. And the most nuts stat is that, not stat, but not only do they do reshoots and does Crichton take over, but at one point there are dueling reshoot units. Where on different
A bake-off?
stages in the same complex, McTiernan's doing reshoots and Crichton's doing reshoots, and the cast is going back and forth between them. And they're like, we just need to get as much shit as we can to figure out which of these guys can solve the movie.
We'll talk about
But the
it.
movie doesn't. Well, anyway, yeah.
No,
It's like-
go ahead. Yeah, you're right. The movie does not feel like, oh my God, there's 2 movies in here.
No.
And the tone is switching so wildly or anything like that. But then again, Crichton is a decent director. I don't know
Decent.
if you've seen a lot of Crichton movies, but he's made really good movies.
Westworld, Coma,
Great-
Great,
Coma's awesome.
Train Robbery was like
Westworld is fun.
Runaway. Is that what the Selleck one's called?
Let's see. Runaway, yes. I never saw Looker, but I've seen Westworld, Coma, Great Train Robbery.
Mhm.
And they're fun.
yeah.
But they are all like, it's, you don't watch them and think like, wow, this was like a master.
A visionary director.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
like,
very
you're
nuts
like,
and bolts.
these are like
Yeah.
well crafted.
He's a really
he's a
good-
good storyteller.
Yes, journeyman director,
Yeah.
basically, aided by his innate storytelling instincts and working with his own material. But he's not a visionary visualist.
Which is not
right.
dissimilar from McTiernan, I think.
McTiernan's like the god of, I know how to communicate the geography of
Right.
an action
Yeah.
scene and make everything clear, and spatial, stuff will be clear.
Right.
But yeah, I don't
He
also
doesn't, he doesn't
don't
have like
think
a
of him as-
signature shot. You
There's
know?
no style for style's sake. It's all function,
Yeah.
but has a much stronger visual intelligence.
He does, and I think honestly that is present in this film.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like I watch this movie and I'm like, oh my God, like this action is incoherent. Nothing's, there are other problems I have with this movie. The action is mostly fine.
Yeah.
Would you agree? Am I telling tales out of school?
Yeah.
It's not like incredible or anything, but like it's not like it's fine.
Yeah, it gets the job done.
I know what's happening.
No,
you
and
know?
there's a quote that JJ pulled where McTiernan's like, look, there's no like lost masterpiece version of this. If they gave me back the footage, my cuts may be 10 minutes different.
Right.
So
right,
interesting.
Substantially. He's like, there's maybe 10 minutes of stuff in there that I identify as Crichton having shot, and maybe 10 minutes of stuff that I shot that I would want back in the movie. But also a lot of it is like stuff he shot under increasing pressure.
Yeah.
Right.
As the budget started to escalate.
Right.
Okay, but okay. Wait. I'm trying to
Step back,
before,
step
but yeah,
back, step
before
back,
we
step
right,
back.
like I just remember when this came out. I
Mhm.
guess I was I think I was really hot on Banderas because of Zorro.
Zorro.
Yeah, and obviously I knew him generally, but like as
This
a
is coming out
13-year-old,
Yes.
I was like the guy from Zorro. Like,
Wait,
my
so this
favorite
would have
guy.
come out the same year?
It would have come out
It was supposed to,
Yeah.
but it came out the year
because
after.
Zorro also was delayed.
Was it?
Obviously ended up working for everybody, but I think that had production difficulties and was originally a 97 movie that went to 98. And then this was a 98 movie that went to 99.
Well, Zorro had the thing where Robert Rodriguez got fired.
Right.
Sort of amazing to think about him directing it, like
Yes.
what that would have looked like. And then, so right, they got kind of stalled by that. And then they brought on Martin Campbell, and things were out of control, and it went 10 million over budget. And it was sort of like, is this another Cutthroat Island? Like, these movies
Yes.
don't work. You need so much practical shit. It's not. And then, of course, the movie comes out and everyone loves it. Like, it's one of the great movies. Which
So everyone's like thinking, okay, 13th Warrior, we can just get this across the line. We've got
Right,
another
right.
Zorro on our hands. People would love to see Vikings snotting in a bowl.
it's I think the 13th Warrior is doomed from the outset.
Yes.
I think if there was a totally normal production of this movie with the same basic people involved, with no fucking weird reshoots or whatever, and no going wildly over budget, it still would not do well.
No.
Fundamentally, I just don't think people have a huge appetite
That's
for
what's
this
wild
story,
about it,
right?
is they double the spend on this movie when you're just like, there's such a roof to how much you're ever gonna get out of this. It feels wild to like treat this movie like it's The Flash or whatever,
Yeah.
and say like, we need this to work. We will not quit on this thing.
Right.
It's such a cool idea. Like, even going back to Crichton's original concept of like, what's the real story behind Beowulf? I'm into that. Like, that's great. I'm into the idea of the story being told. I'm into the lore of Vikings and whatnot. And
Are
I
you
think
going to adapt every single thing I read in my first year of college medieval studies class?
this was my first year of college also. And I feel
Beowulf,
like it's on.
Gawain.
Wait, is this the first time you've covered technically an adaptation of the same source material?
Twice?
Yeah.
Has to
Sort
be,
of.
right?
Yes. Right?
Has to be.
I don't know.
Because it's very close, like, event-wise to the plot of Beowulf. Like, you
We've done 2 Star is Born episodes now.
True.
right.
That's
yes.
the other one. That won't have come out, and the time we're talking, Lowery, but
Well,
will have come out. Yes.
I'm trying to think if there's like a foreign
We
American
did our
remake thing we've
mashup
ever done or anything.
Fantastic
but yeah.
Four episode.
Well, that doesn't count. But
Worst episode we ever done. Maybe.
But yes, no, we are doing another Beowulf
Yes.
movie and another Beowulf movie that kind of like was like, no, we can make Beowulf work as a modern blockbuster. And audiences were mostly like, I don't really care.
But
you know?
I mean, look, I'm just going to serve you up the question. Not that you told me to ask you this, right?
Yeah.
But like wondering, like, why does Lowery think about this movie still and talk about it? And then watching it, I just kept thinking, the version of this I would want to see is the like Green Knight style version of it.
Yeah.
The version of it I would want to see has a capped budget,
yes.
does not need to conform to certain expectations of like adventure blockbuster films at a certain size.
I now know, having gone through the process of making a Green Knight, that the capped budget would probably scare me off now. Like,
Sure.
where I'm like, I don't know if I have the fortitude to go through that of trying to make a medieval or pre-medieval epic. But it does appeal to me. Like, this type of storytelling, this
Yeah.
type of myth making and peeling back the layers of myth is always really interesting to me. And to a certain extent, I think every movie I've made has sort of been, to date, has been sort of about peeling back some level of legend to try to like expose the fallacies within. That sounds very highfalutin, but that is
No.
kind of like what I'm interested in doing. And watching this movie again, I was like, I wonder if this is one of the first instances of that kind of planted that seed, because I remember the scene of Bullywolf. Is that that's who he goes by in this? The
Sure.
Beowulf surrogate, who, when he dies,
Beowulf, yes.
yeah, and just being like, oh, I'm witnessing a mortal character giving up his life and passing into legend. And I thought that was captured very well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that moment stuck with me, where he just sits there, and dying is like an inherently pathetic act. It's just like a series of failures.
Right.
I think
And-
all dead people are cowards.
Yeah. And watching the way in which people regard death is always what brings the poetry to it. And I was like, this is a beautiful moment. It reminded me of Robert De Niro dying in Heat. Like the
Yeah.
idea of like a character regarding someone else sitting down and dying. There's something very evocative about that. And so that stuck with me. But more than that, the thing that really I keep thinking about over the 24 years since this opened
Mhm.
is the scene where he learns their language.
Best scene, or a really cool idea.
A really cool idea,
Yes.
executed
I
fairly
now
well.
think you need to remake the 13th Warrior.
Yeah.
The way you were just talking about, or do Eaters of the Dead. Just do it. I guess you can never. No studio would touch it. This is the
fact that
rare
they
kind
didn't
of bomb.
use the original title.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's the only wiggle room to possibly make people not even realize it's connected.
You could
I
give
think
it.
you could get away with it. It's more interesting, like in the context now of like Vikings, which I've not seen, but
Mhm.
apparently was a hugely successful
It
The
was.
TV
Very,
show.
very
Yeah.
successful.
that went on and was like moved from one network to another
Yeah.
and has spin-offs.
That and Black Sails, those are the two sort of Game of Thrones adjacent period,
Yeah.
sexy, violent dramas that lasted for years with huge fan bases, despite no critical acclaim, basically.
and then it's really interesting to watch this now in the context of having seen The Northman,
Yeah.
and
A great
which
film, in my
maybe didn't. I love it. It's a masterpiece, but
Oh, yeah.
maybe it didn't set the box office on fire, but did extremely well.
Yeah.
On VOD, like very, 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 very well.
basically like focus have told me, and it sounds like maybe I've told you, that that movie was like a sensation for them
Yes,
on VOD.
completely.
Yeah.
Like to their mild surprise, I think. Yeah. I love that movie so much.
As do I.
But one thing I love about it is Eggers' whole deal with all his movies where he's like, this is sincere. Like,
Mhm.
these are Vikings. They have Viking goals. Like, I am not making this for you. Like, he's trying to get to Valhalla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's his goal.
Yeah.
And he does.
And
the
he
final
does,
shot
and
of the
at
movie.
the end, I'm crying because I'm like, that crazy bastard, he got to Valhalla.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Truly, like, one of the rare movies where I was like, I have tears coming from my face.
I was
Like, usually I'm like, oh, I'm gonna cry. I can tell. Like, this is working me up. And instead, I was just watching it, like, as he's
Surprised.
going to
Yeah.
Valhalla, going, oh my god, you've seen the Northman?
I was rewatching it last night because
like the Northman.
I was
Yeah.
wanted to watch that funeral scene again
Mm.
because it's the same incantation, like the low I see my father, low I see my mother, like lifting the woman who's going to be sacrificed up 3 times. And I was like, oh, that when I watched the 13th Warrior, I was like, oh, that is literally they just did. I mean, it's obviously a traditional
Right.
Viking funeral,
Right.
and I just wanted to see how Robert did it again, and then I just wound up watching The Northman because it's so darn good.
Now I'm gonna go.
Do you-
watch the Northman.
Do you remember this being a movie you liked when you first saw it, or was it just that certain ideas in it stuck with you?
Did you see it in theater?
I saw it in theaters. I was pleasantly surprised by it when it came
Mhm.
out. And so this goes into in high school, I got a job as a projectionist and saw from 97 until 2004. I worked at a movie theater. That was like I
And
was a career movie theater employee.
I know that, and I think of you just running back and forth.
Yeah,
between you've told me
I told
about
the
it.
story. Yeah,
Right,
I
between
think on
all
our
the
Sleepy Hollow episode,
all
you
the
were talking
theaters
about
because
that.
they was
Yeah.
all one long
Yes.
corridor linked to all
Exactly.
the rooms. Right.
and so I was there when the Eaters of the Dead trailer came in.
Okay.
And threaded it up and watched it and being like, ooh, this sounds pretty cool. And then obviously at that point, without the internet, any sort of release delays came through us from letters from the studio saying,
Sure.
pull these trailers, these movies aren't coming. Pull this poster, this movie's not coming.
The first trailer had Eaters of the Dead as the title on it.
It
In your
did,
memory?
yeah.
Wild.
It's on YouTube. So
Wow.
my memory of watching it was like, this trailer is scary.
Yeah.
The
Sure.
the title was scary.
Title's
I didn't-
scary.
I didn't know what it was. And the trailer, I just remember being,
Although
this
I'm
is-
an eater of the dead sometimes, like a dead
that's
animal.
fair.
Well, don't brag about
I'm
it.
not bragging.
And I went back, the trailer's on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm
It's
finding
more
it.
just
Yep, here we go.
unpleasant. It's an unpleasant
Mm.
trailer.
Mm.
It's weird what footage they use.
It's very dark. It's a lot of like torches and horses. It says "Pray for the living." I guess it's sort of like the monster people attacking.
You're
It's a lot
probably
of that.
watching without sound right now,
I
but
am.
the sound is really screechy and just
Okay.
kind of like off-putting.
How did you guys go about rewatching this movie?
Also, Antonio Banderas barely visible in this trailer.
There's almost no. It's just all these riders with torches, right?
Yeah,
It's all
you see
wide
him in
shots.
shadow for like 5 seconds at
I mean,
the end.
we're
I
going to
watched
talk
it on
about the
iTunes.
Banderas of it a lot. You watch it on iTunes. Do you?
iTunes as well.
Okay. I found the compression on iTunes and the quality of the video, which is listed as HD but looked to me like a VHS,
Hmm.
in a movie that's pretty dark, almost unwatchable.
You found it almost.
I didn't think it was that bad. But
Yeah, I don't remember
it
having this
surely
problem.
has not been
I ended up
up-resed from DVD.
firing up
Right.
ExpressVPN, our loyal sponsors on this show, because I saw that it was on Disney Plus and it was a better version. Because I actually was like 20 minutes in finding it hard to make out the images.
Interesting.
And it did look better on Disney Plus. I don't know what the fuck was going on there if you guys had an okay time on iTunes.
It was fine.
It didn't.
But
It is dark. It is muddy.
It is
yeah.
a dark movie that is not served well by basically being abandoned. Like, this movie's never going to get restored, right?
No, there's no, and there's also
The idea of spending more money on this movie might actually be like illegal, like in terms of accounting. Like you can't.
The only source JJ could find to like pull quotes from the people who worked on it was there was a 2011 French Blu-ray with an hour of new interviews. And I cannot believe they got anyone to sit down to talk about this thing 12 years later, but that France is apparently the only country that cares.
I mean, Crichton liked it.
Yeah.
I'm glad he deserved to be happy. He had
It's
so few
exactly,
wins,
and
in
it
his
also
life.
is exactly the book. He's like, oh, this is the book I wrote.
Yeah.
right. I
Yeah.
guess that's all. All right. Here's what all right. I just want to say about Crichton.
Mhm.
Obviously, Jurassic Park. Yes, Sphere was my big one. That book rules.
Mm.
I recommend it to anyone. I like that book so much that I like that movie a lot.
Mhm.
Even though that movie is sort of like half risible,
Yeah.
I'm still just like, there's a sphere like at the bottom of the ocean is
Sure.
kind of just compelling enough to me.
Yeah.
So that was always I want to read more Crichton. I've never read like the Andromeda Strain. I've never read like some of his like masterpieces.
Perfect time. He's got a new book coming out.
Isn't he dead?
He is, but he had an unfinished book that
Yes,
is now
that's
being
right. I
released,
knew
and
this.
James Patterson finished it.
Yeah.
Is it the one that's like a Jurassic Park prequel, or that's already been released? He wrote like a Jurassic Park prequel set in the 19th century.
That feels like something that's already been released, but I actually have no idea.
What the fuck was it called?
I think that was released.
Dragon Teeth. Yes, Dragon Teeth. But the other thing I always think is he was 6'9".
Yeah,
Humongous.
crazy that he was 6'9".
famously tall person.
There is a
I mean, obviously
photo.
he created ER as well, or all shit like that. But like,
Well,
he's 6'9".
We're gonna dig into this, but photo of him on the set of this movie. I pulled up a production still of him directing a bunch of the Nordic Viking actors, and it is bizarre to see him towering over them.
Yeah.
And it's like Antonio Banderas, not a short man,
No,
looks like
well, how tall is
me
he?
next
Sure.
to
Right.
all the Nordic actors,
I
and
think
then Crichton's like a head above them.
Antonio Banderas is listed at 5'9", so he might be on the shorter side.
Well, I like that.
I remember when the Expendables 2 trailer or poster came out,
He might be in 3, but go on.
whichever one it is. I can't
Yeah.
remember which one. There was this poster where they're all standing and at the same height.
Yes.
And the trickery of it, like
Right.
of having Jet Li stand as the same height as like Dolph Lundgren or whatever, is so offensive. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, these men are like, there's a foot in difference between the tallest and the shortest.
Yes.
Like, let them, but like instead they all have to be like even. And it was just very funny.
Yeah.
And I
Jet
remember
Li just
looking
has
up-
4-foot hands.
Right. I remember looking up all their heights, and Banderas was one of the smaller ones.
Okay.
But God bless him.
I love it.
Compact package, but
Yeah.
the full package.
Yeah.
The 13th Warrior. I did not see this movie in theaters. I never saw this movie. I saw
Same.
it the other day
Same.
for this podcast.
Yeah.
I do remember my dad telling me about a book called Eaters of the Dead.
Cool. Good father.
Yeah.
I
with
wish my
this kind
dad
of
had
relish.
told me.
Right.
Yeah, my
like-
dad
like-
never fucking told me there was a book called Eaters.
And
of
me
the Dead.
being like, ooh. And he was like, yeah. Anyway, this movie apparently lost $100 million. And then like, that's the only, I've just known this is the movie that lost so much money.
Yeah.
That's it.
I remember
More than
walking
100 million.
by, like, I have a very distinct memory of walking by a poster at the AMC Lincoln Square. My dad being like, I guess it was a Lowe's Lincoln Square at that point, and being like, that thing's going to be a disaster.
Right.
Just
And
pointing at
obviously-
it being like, they shot that like 3 years ago.
Yeah, it came out in August. Like it's you can smell it even
Yeah.
when we were savvy little stupid,
Savvy little stupid
trade
boys.
reading.
Yeah.
Exactly, boys. But this book, okay, I'm opening the dossier.
Okay.
Michael Crichton, 76, publishes Eater of the Dead. It's his 14th novel, but only the 4th under his own name. All his first 3 books all got turned into movies. Andromeda Strain, Terminal Man, Great Train Robbery. You ever seen Terminal Man?
I have not.
George Siegel fighting a big computer?
Sounds
great.
incredible.
Pretty good.
Add it to the remake list, Lowery.
Crichton himself, of course, had made movies, as we said.
Right.
So
Right. Just the 70s were like his books are hitting, and he's like, what if I start directing? And his movies are hits too.
right. So in 1978, Orion Pictures and Warner Brothers announced Eaters of the Dead
Mhm.
will be adapted for the big screen.
Obviously.
Michael Crichton is our director.
Makes sense.
Right. Bingo, bango. Sugar in the gas tank. Right? Oh, no, that's bad.
Gas in the gas tank. Good.
Project fails to take off. Goes to Karolko at some point. Warren Lewis, the screenwriter, writes a new script for it. Like, for whatever reason, Crichton movies died in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like the Congo and Jurassic Park and all that, like that's the 90s rebound of them.
The other thing is Crichton has like a years-long writer's block period.
Right.
Jurassic
Interesting.
Park breaks a like extended, by all accounts. I weirdly saw Michael Ovitz talk about this once at the 92nd Street Y
Oh, okay.
as the greatest accomplishment of his career was like Crichton had years where he could not write and was like wrestling with himself on the floor.
Yeah, because it goes Congo 1980, Sphere 87,
Yeah.
Jurassic Park 90. So Sphere he clearly had to like drag out of himself.
Yeah.
And then in the 90s, he does like 7 novels.
Right. And, like Jurassic Park like finally breaks the dam for him and obviously is like this huge second wave of his
Right.
career. But that I think the book coming out and being such a sensation even before the movie, although the movie rights are obviously sold immediately. It's like there's a sort of second wave of appreciation for Crichton,
Right.
because he had been gone for a little bit. People are excited to have him back.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, he starts out the fucking decade with Jurassic and ER, which obviously is not a thing that he's like hugely hands-on
He had
for.
no involvement in it. He wrote a pilot script.
But
yeah.
people in Hollywood have gotten more credit for less successful things that they did less on.
Look, his name is on 15 seasons of ER.
Correct.
Yeah.
So between his name being at the beginning of every episode and Jurassic Park, the 90s, clearly Hollywood's like, this guy is back to being untouchable.
Right.
Anything with Crichton attached is fucking gold. And then basically everyone who takes on Crichton after that flops.
Strikes out. I would agree. Yes.
Because Disclosure, Sphere, Congo.
Disclosure does well, right?
Disclosure's
It's a
the
bad
one
movie.
that does well.
But yes.
Timeline?
Congo, Sphere, Timeline.
Timeline.
And these are big
Yeah,
directors.
you forgot about Timeline.
Donner, McTiernan, Levinson.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I
Even
mean,
Lost World is obviously like very successful but less liked.
yeah. And that's it. I mean, there was a A&E Andromeda strain
Mhm.
that nobody liked, I think. Or maybe people did, and then people yell at me now. But like, there's never been another Crichton adaptation that worked, even after
No.
his death.
And
Like, no
Westworld,
one's-
the show, is so distantly.
It is.
Yes.
I guess that did initially work
It did.
before it sort of went off the rails.
But, like,
it has nothing
90s
to do with his
Yeah.
right. Barely
90s Crichton feeding frenzy of like A-list stars and A-list directors are going to attach themselves to Crichton projects. And all of them are these very hyped projects with huge budgets. Almost all of them have really difficult extended productions and then just land with a thud.
Man, Timeline and the 13th Warrior would be a brutal double feature.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, let's program it
Yeah.
and introduce it and make everyone unlock the doors from the outside.
Yes.
They're aesthetically very similar. My memory
They
is
are.
like they
Yeah.
dark and
torches.
torches. Yes.
yes. And like both are like Hollywood's like, I know what you want, Vikings, right? And the audience is like, well, no, we weren't interested. Sorry.
And
the
both of those
timeline is the same.
movies-
It's like, what if you went back to a castle? And they're like, I don't know, I don't care.
Both of those movies are lead actors who absolutely do not belong in this film.
Paul Walker and has seen a. I guess it's not a cell phone back then. He's seen he's seen a pager.
Yes.
He's seen an answering machine.
But the whole, he's a modern day, like he's a graduate student who creates a time machine by accident.
I believe that's right. I've never seen it.
I mean, yeah.
I will see it for $100,000 cash, non-sequential bills.
David,
Okay.
I just think with everything going on in the world today, there are better uses of money.
You're right.
If any listener has $100,000
Don't
and
give
are
it to me to
planning
watch
to wire
Timeline.
it to David to watch Timeline, I ask you to
Yeah,
reconsider.
just give it
Double.
to someone else.
Yeah.
Double it.
Double it. So William Wisher
Mhm.
rewrites this script. William Wisher obviously wrote Terminator 2
Mhm.
with James Cameron, etc. So he's a hot name. John McTiernan gets attached. And Andrew Vanya, the Rambo guy.
Mhm.
Um,
Coralco?
Yes. But I think at this point he's maybe leapt off of Coralco.
Post.
He had produced Tombstone,
Mhm.
Evita, Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Right. What was this new company called?
Synergy, but with more eyes than you think there should be. But he also made Super Mario Brothers, Judge Dredd, Color of Night. Like Super Mario Brothers, Judge Dredd, like those, like I have such affection for the
Of course.
90s. We spent too much money. There's a lot of sets.
Yes.
There's one star maybe who's completely out of control. I don't
Maybe
know.
several.
Yeah, but everyone hated them at the time, and I watched them with fondness.
Also, movies that have almost abject contempt for their source material.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, exactly. We'll take the name and the costume of
Right.
Judge Dredd.
Helmets
but-
coming off immediately.
right. We're not going to respect any of the
We're
rules.
doing Mario Brothers, but none of that dumb baby shit.
Right. Except with Mario Brothers, it was like, with Judge Dredd, it was like you pissed off a bunch of aggro-British comic book nerds.
Yes.
With Mario Brothers, it was like the country of Japan was like, this has brought great shame to us. Like, why has this happened? And Shigeru Miyamoto was for years just like, I was so humiliated by that. Like, how dare they?
I refuse to acknowledge the existence of
Right,
movies
right.
as an art form because of this disgrace.
You've
brought
seen
upon
the
us.
Bob Hoskins thing about Mario, right? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously he's talked about how he drank throughout the production and
Yeah.
was mostly just trying to build a deck on his house or whatever.
Uh-huh.
But there's that thing where someone's like, "Oh, I know Mario," and he showed me this video game. He's like, "Boop, boop," and I was looking at that and I was like, I've played King Lear. like it's so good.
Is it the story too that like someone on set asked him if he had played the video game and he was like, "What video game?"
Yes, I think that's
like he just thought it was like a pretty bizarre spec script.
But what I'm trying to communicate here is that like synergy
Yes.
would like make a lot of money and then like Judge Dredd would come around and they go back to zero. They were kind of like living paycheck to paycheck.
Right. They were making
big swings.
one for them, one for no one.
Right.
Yeah.
Like they'd be like, Vito
The words
hit.
of
All
Sean
right, we got
Clemens,
money
yeah.
again. We can open the doors. And they're like, oh shit, Color of Night. No one saw it, whatever.
Right.
So they need Disney to help fund this movie.
Yes.
That's how Disney comes aboard. Disney gets some rights. And then as it's about to start production, Synergy gets liquidated. And so Disney takes over the entire project.
A perfect example of a moment where Disney should have stepped back for a second.
And
And
like,
said,
maybe we don't do this.
maybe we
Right.
just don't do this.
And instead they're like, no, this will be a Touchstone release fully owned by Disney. Antonio Banderas, Evita and the Mask of Zorro.
Yeah.
He's hot stuff.
Right. I mean,
He's sort of people's sexiest man alive. Like he's one of those
That's
guys.
like the peak. Like
Yeah.
like he's just breaking out.
Every woman is like, what a hunk.
right.
Critics are like, this guy's a real actor, right? Like he has sort of everything going.
He had the
for
art
him.
house credit at the beginning from
Right.
Almodovar. That's
Right. Like
blossoming
80s
into.
King of Spanish cinema.
Yeah.
This guy can do anything. He's so uninhibited. I can't believe he looks like this. You have certain people like latching on to him. And then he like jumps over to Hollywood in the 90s, is learning his roles phonetically before he's even fluent. But it's one of
And
those
he's still
guys.
killing it, like
Killing it.
crushing it.
But one of those guys where you could just feel that Hollywood, like everyone got together at a boardroom and said, like, we're all in on this guy.
Right.
We're all going to commit to like a 6-year plan of making Antonio Banderas an A-list leading man. And it's like Mambo Kings to like Philadelphia to Assassins. And then this
Interview
is
with
the run.
Vampire.
Right. Right. And then they're finally like, great. He gets to be the guy above the title. It's Desperado. It's Zorro. It's this.
How do you feel about Antonio? Generally.
I love him. He's great.
He's the best.
Yeah, he's just like an utter delight whenever he shows up on screen.
You made a great comment, David. I don't remember if it was after Dial of Destiny, Sims. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
If it was after, Lowery, you make many great comments. Sims, one specific good comment you made that I remember,
After Dial of Destiny.
it was
Which
either
he's in.
after Dial of Destiny or Uncharted, but
Sure.
the more damning thing is you might have said it both times.
Yeah.
Of like, for a guy who is one of my favorite living actors, it is kind of astounding how he can also just give you nothing.
Well, like, not give you nothing.
Give you
but-
nothing's the wrong wording. He
No.
can be nothing.
Yeah, it's just like in both those movies, he shows up and you're like, great, I'm getting a whole act of this guy.
Right.
And then 5 minutes later, it's like he just got hit by a bus.
But not only that,
And to be clear, he doesn't get hit by a bus in either of those movies, but
Yeah.
he might as well.
I have never seen a performance that I feel he is phoning in because he has so much energy as a performer. He never comes across as lazy, but it is wild to watch him in like a movie like Dial of Destiny where he shows up and you're like, automatically I'm getting 20 minutes of juice out of this
Yeah.
guy. And even screen time aside, you're like, none of this is registering. It is bizarre. And I think this is one of those films where you're like, he just like kind of disappears into the movie.
He doesn't even look like Antonio
He
Banderas.
does,
No.
but yeah.
And-
He
and
does disappear in this movie.
He's like doing shit. Like it doesn't feel like it's lack of commitment, but you're like, it is bizarre how a guy who is just like, can be this electrifying and then even has the ability to like tone it down and go somewhere deeper and whatever, can just sort of like show up, walk his way across a scene,
Look-
and make no impression.
I think this movie's aiming for sort of realism that hurts him. Like he's better as like a larger than life character.
Yes.
And that's not what he's playing, like an observer,
There's like the scene where they're like, "Can you read us a poem or whatever?" Where he like
Right.
has to, and you're like, "More of that, please." Like more of
Yes.
him being an orator and getting to bring some flamboyance to it. But it's all very tamped down.
Flamboyance is the word. There's also just like an innate musicality to the way he speaks that does not necessarily mix well with a certain like reserved grit
Yeah,
that this movie is going for. And it translates even just the way he moves, where you're like, what a perfect fit for Zorro. Like, you just imagine the moment that Almodovar sees him for the first time and is like, fuck, I can do anything with this
He's
guy.
so good in all those movies.
Right.
and
but-
here he can't. He's like, "I can't lift this sword.
Yes.
Right. He
It's too heavy for me."
didn't enjoy making this film.
He fucks up his back badly while filming.
Yes. He also says about acting against basically a bunch of 6'10 Norsemen it was like making a movie of the Los Angeles Lakers. These people were enormous. Like, I think he physically was just like, how do I stand out amongst these people?
The back injury thing is interesting because this does feel like a movie where they're shooting around him a lot, where there will be fight sequences where you're like, there hasn't even been a cutaway to him in minutes.
Omar Sharif, of course, basically shat all over this movie, saying, after making that film, I said, let us stop this nonsense, these meal tickets we do because they pay well, unless I find a stupendous film that I love. Like, he sort of retired. Now, he made Monsieur Ibrahim like 4 years later.
He said, I won't
just
step
sort of
off
his
the bench
comeback.
unless I get material that really speaks to me. He does that. Everyone's like, Omar Sharif is back. And then what does he do immediately after that?
What?
Hidalgo.
Right, he just takes it.
Basically
He's
the
like, they're like,
same
hey, can you
movie
be like an old guy on a horse?
as
He's like,
this.
yes, of course.
I read
Disney funneling $100 million plus into a movie no one gives a shit about, where he's like once again sort of prestige for hire.
I read that quote from him and assumed that he had been a much larger part of the movie at
Yeah.
one point.
And it's right.
Then I read the book. He's not even a character, and I was like, oh, surely this movie did not start media res. It had a first act,
Yeah.
and in which all of those brief flashbacks were fully fledged scenes.
Right.
But there's even more of that in the movie now than there is in the book. In the book, it's like page 1, I slept with the wrong person and I got sent to this rustic land.
Yeah.
Believe me, I would pay today for a movie about Antonio Banderas cucking some like
That's the movie I want to
Arabian
see.
lord and getting sent away from like, ancient Baghdad.
This movie breezes past in the first 10 minutes something I want to unpack for hours.
Right, and instead
watch
he's
in
like, I
detail.
chose the wrong woman
Yeah.
to love,
Yeah.
and now I must to get on a ship. Now, obviously, I don't know how well Antonio Banderas as ancient Arabian warrior would go over in 2023. In the 90s,
but I'm
it was
saying
still kind of like,
scrap,
hey, yeah.
reset, go, here's the movie. Banderas keeps sticking his dick in the wrong places.
I mean,
Just start fresh.
That is something that actually does keep happening in the book. That's one key difference.
oh, really? There's
from-
more shagging?
There's a lot.
More
On a-
shagging.
on a-
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of Viking sexual assault, as one would
Okay,
anticipate.
sure.
So it's actually good that it all got removed. But
right, okay.
But Antonio Banderas' character is quite a bit more horny than he is in
Because,
the movie.
you can tell he's
As you should be.
it's his origin story, right?
When McTiernan talks about his version of the movie and how it would have differed, he said Disney wanted to cut down that shit as much as possible. And he's like, I basically had like 10 more minutes of that. That was the biggest difference in my cut.
Like debauchery. Or no,
of
Banderas.
Banderas before he joins the Viking, and
Sure.
they would like take all the Muslim stuff down to as
that
little as
makes
possible.
no sense because the way this movie starts is confounding.
Correct.
Like the movie, he's a fish out of water.
Yes.
It's the crucial thing to the movie, obviously.
You're probably wondering how I wound up here.
Right.
That's
It
like-
does start
and the
with
movie's
a
just
real,
like,
yeah.
anyway, so I'm with these Vikings because, and I'm like, no, who are you? What is the previous pond, sir, that
Yeah.
you have been removed from?
I knew so little about this movie going in outside of names and title. I was so disoriented by the first 15 minutes that it took
Yes.
me an hour past that to go, oh, this is Beowulf.
Yes,
I
yes,
genuinely
yes.
didn't register for me because I was still like, what was the fuck was all of that?
This definitely is a classic. You start the movie and you're like, did I click a button and accidentally jump 3 chapters?
Yes. And
Yes.
the cut back. It's like that was like when you're watching these movies, you're like trying to dissect where did it go wrong, what got
Right.
reshot, what got reshuffled in the post, and like the cut back to him on the boat is such a crazy. Again, like it feels like you're just jumping a scene in the
Yes.
movie,
Right.
and I was like, surely they had an entire first act, but I don't actually know that they did.
No, but I think there were more Sharif scenes. I think there was a little
There
more
had to
of
be
this.
more Sharif.
Yeah.
Or he just did the same scene 8 times. Or
I
like
think
they bring him
that's-
back, like let's shoot the funeral again, let's shoot this again.
Yeah.
That would be my guess. But I mean, to repurpose the bad Twitter joke, you do start watching this movie and go like, is this not making sense because I didn't watch the 1st through 12th Warriors?
Yes, of course. Of course. Look, okay, production begins
Mhm.
June 1997 in Canada. Most of the film was shot in Vancouver Island. It wraps by October. It was budgeted at $60 million. It was championed by the British Columbia Film Commission as one of their big, expensive projects that year, along with Mr.
I
Magoo.
was going to say.
The big two.
Yeah.
They're going to dominate Hollywood in 98. Warrior and Magoo.
Very different time for Disney.
There was whatever type security. Let me see. Big stunts. Stuck on
Miserable,
the island for
cold.
5 months.
Yes,
Yeah,
isolated.
exactly.
Right. I think
Shitty
Magoo's-
conditions. Have you ever shot in Canada?
Well, funnily enough,
Peter
I was
Pan
watching
was-
this movie and I was like, this looks so familiar.
And you're like, shit.
And then I was like, oh yes, I was there. And then I was also like, some of these Vikings look pretty familiar. And I looked in the credits and
Really?
there's one gentleman named John DeSantis who is also in Master and Commander, and he's one of the principal pirates and
he's huge.
in Peter Pan, who's taller than Michael Crichton. And he plays
broad. Like he's, yeah.
But is this-
Ragnar, the Loathsome. I can't remember what his character name in this movie is.
Is
But
this primarily the same island you used for Neverland?
Ragnar,
No,
Ragnar
no.
the Dower.
we shot almost no location
Okay,
stuff in Canada, in Vancouver, but we scouted it all.
gotcha.
And so I was like, I'm pretty sure I've been to most of these places.
Um,
You were at Newfoundland?
Newfoundland was
Yeah,
like all the
okay.
location
Yeah.
work. Newfoundland's awesome.
Live
Newfoundland
show.
is awesome.
Live show.
I don't know if there are enough people to fill a room in Newfoundland. No
I think
offense
there-
to the
surprisingly,
there would be.
territory. of-
Surprisingly, there would be. It's like, it's pretty crazy how, like, for such a crazily hard to get to place, it's like a vibrant community.
I
God
hear
bless.
that place is lousy with hodgehogs.
Yeah, no, they're all over the place.
Yeah.
Just don't mention Labrador when you're there. It's a little Canadian joke.
the fuck are these little
There's the town of Dildo, famously.
Yeah.
That's what.
I love how there are those towns, and now like there's some town called like Fuck in Sweden or something where they're like, we're gonna change the name. We're sick of this. Like people just come to take pictures of this sign. We're just gonna change the name. All right. Word emerges in 1998. Film is in trouble. It gets pulled off the slate.
Mhm.
Quote unquote production delays. This is of course pre-internet.
Right.
So these rumors just come out in like tiny little dribs and drabs, right? Like
And there's no info being filled in between. It's just suddenly like Disney puts out a statement, the film will be pushed to the fall,
right.
and then it just never comes out for a while.
Of course, the film was supposed to be called Eaters of the Dead, which McTiernan thought was a cool title. Disney decides it's too dark and scary. He tells that story about watering the grass at his house and saying the Eaters of the Dead sounds like a horror movie. So they changed it to the 13th Warrior.
But also, shouldn't they be kind of selling this as a horror movie?
It's an angle
It's-
versus what this movie has, no angle.
Correct. In its
again, it's those
marketing, it has
taglines you
no
were talking
angle.
about.
Right.
The like leaning into the
Fear.
fear. Yeah.
Right.
Embrace fear, reject fear. like they can't even decide the ad guys.
This is a
Are we
time, though.
pro-fear or anti-fear?
We were talking with Arp. He was texting us about
Alex
like
was
what's this shift that happens like late 90s into early 2000s where suddenly A-list stars and directors are not terrified to make horror films, where it's not looked upon as a lesser genre in a certain way. And we were saying like Sixth Sense is responsible for a lot of it.
Yeah.
Which comes out right before this. But I do think when a budget gets over a certain number, they're just like, this can't be horror. Horror is trashy.
Right.
It is unbecoming.
Horror is definitely seen now as the domain of lesser, smaller, new line type studios, right?
Right.
You know, classy horror has died of death. It's coming back.
Now,
With
if the
Sixth
movie
Sense
was in
and the
trouble,
Others
they'd be
and
like,
stuff.
Yes.
they'd be like, lean into the horror, make
That's
it
what
more
they-
horror. Yeah.
That's
Right.
what they did with the Poirot movie.
Yeah.
Like Haunting in Venice. Death in Venice. That'd be different movie.
crazy.
Haunting in Venice. Like I just remember seeing that trailer and I'm like, this is cut like a Blumhouse trailer.
Right.
Like it just has Poirot in it.
Yes.
But like the trailer is like, this is fucking nerve jangling thrill ride, you know?
But I mean, the other examples we were saying, The Haunting is 99, which is Jan de Bont, but it's Spielberg producing it, and it's Liam Neeson and Catherine Zeta-Jones, and it's like a big budget.
Right.
A lot of it is like Spielberg and Zemeckis and those guys coming of an age where they're like, we grew up on these movies, we like them, we take them seriously, we're going to produce them. And then Zemeckis does What Lies Beneath.
Right.
Right.
But yes, this movie should have been like, here's the pitch. Antonio Banderas fights monsters.
Fights like cannibal people.
Yeah.
Like, terrifying. Okay. Apparently Disney was trying to get McTiernan committed to another Crichton adaptation
Right.
called Airframe.
They basically keep this movie going and pumping money into it because they think the real play is getting him to make this other Crichton movie afterwards.
Yeah.
What's Airframe about?
It's like about the investigation of an airplane accident. Kind of sounds cool
Yeah.
in that Crichton-y way of like he's really good at taking you into like the
process.
technical process,
Mhm.
right, of something.
And
Be it
McTiernan's good at making that shit
Viruses
exciting.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then McTiernan, of course, eventually says "fuck you" after this movie, being
Well, he
I'm
just
not
never
doing
wants
anything
to
with
touch
you again.
Crichton ever again.
Right,
Right. Yeah.
or Disney.
Yeah.
So, McTiernan said basically like this was originally going to be a PG-13 blockbuster. It got turned into like a gorier R-rated movie.
One of the only times where it's happened in that direction, where this
Right.
movie is like greenlit as PG-13 Eaters of the Dead. And then at some point they go like, we're changing the title to something more generic, less horror sounding, but also asking you to make it bloodier because we watched the cut and it feels like we're pulling punches.
Right.
And he's like, if I had known it was R from the beginning, which I would have preferred, I would have structured everything differently.
Yeah.
I would have designed all these sequences differently.
And it should have been R from the beginning.
Right. And now I'm basically like going back for reshoots and just doing like Tom Savini gags.
Which
Yeah,
there aren't even
right.
that many,
No.
honestly.
But they just throw in some
Yeah.
bloody stuff just
Yeah.
to throw it in. There's someone's head gets popped up at one point.
Yeah.
There's
In-
so much
In
potential.
like one of those smooth motions where I'm like, heads
Yeah.
don't just come
They-
off of bodies.
No.
Oh, but they do in the movies,
With
and it's
the tongue.
delightful.
I cannot think of another example of that where a studio's like, we're going to funnel more money in and make it R-rated.
Right.
Whereas usually it's like, this costs too much. We need to recut it down to PG-13 and put it out
Totally.
fast.
Obviously, as you said, Crichton overshot his own reshoots, overshot basically almost all of the editing,
Oversaw.
over all the editing. And Kulich, who is Kulich? The producer?
No, Kulich is the
Kulich
actor
is,
who
Beowulf.
plays...
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Said basically like I did an ending with McTiernan and an ending with Crichton, like in
Yeah.
the same lot, and I would be shuttling between like studios.
He said Crichton came up to him at one point and said, by the way, whatever you're doing over there, it's not going to end up in the movie, so don't put too much work into
Yeah,
it.
Crichton was like, I have final cut.
Yeah.
So
What were
whatever
they
you do over
doing?
there. It definitely does not seem like the appropriate process for making a movie.
No, terrible. It sounds like a nightmare.
Just simultaneous is wild. It's not like, oh, Crichton gets a stab at reshoots and then McTiernan.
Because usually, like, I think of a director as like, the studio and I disagree.
Right.
We're going to go our separate ways, creative differences.
Yes.
You don't persevere usually unless it's like dueling edits at the end of the,
Right,
like, we're going to test out two different versions.
But by edit, it was settled. Like, edit was Crichton gets control of that. At a certain point, McTiernan's like, I'm fucking going on to Thomas Crown. I got to do something
Yes.
else.
There's also a Graham Revell score,
Which
really
you said was
cool.
much more influenced by
Like Arabian
Arabic music,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Like, and I love Graham Revell. He did like The Crow and From Dusk Till Dawn.
Mhm.
And
but he's
like,
also the R-rated horror. He's the guy
Yes.
you go to for those movies.
And Crichton's like, fuck that. We're getting Jerry Goldsmith, who's like my guy, and we'll give you swelling orchestral medieval music, like battle music. It's fine.
fun if
Yeah.
generic Goldsmith
Yeah.
score.
Yeah.
He's better at this than anybody. It's not original work from him, though.
Right. John wanted the mother character to be like a grand matriarch. Crichton thought she should be hot. It's amazing how every
Close to
Beowulf, they're
Zemeckis,
like,
yeah. The mother
"Yeah,
should be
she's a
very
mother."
sexy.
Hot.
total babe.
Yeah.
No, in the book, she's described much like a loathsome creature who is like ancient and huge.
But that's one where they like shot that both ways with two different
That
castings.
makes sense. That makes sense.
Right. Kulich says like Michael's cut is simplistic. McTiernan's is more deep and multi-layered. I mean, we're never gonna see these.
No.
McTiernan also has kind of been like, that's nice of him to say, but like, I don't think there's some good version of this movie in a can somewhere.
yeah.
He's like, there's a better version. There's no
Right.
lost masterpiece.
right.
What's his name? Kulich, the actor.
Kulich, Vladimir Kulich.
He understandably talks about like
He seems to be the one guy who, when they were like, do you want to do some DVD interviews? He's like, yeah, sure, I'll do it.
Well, he-
Banderas was like, lose my number. Like,
they wanted Stellan Skarsgård to play his part, which makes perfect
Absolutely.
sense, right? And McTiernan wanted him. No one else wanted him. Disney didn't want him. Crichton didn't want him. McTiernan fought really hard. And the way he talks about it, he clearly was like, here is my entree to Hollywood, the film that will make me, at the very least, Stellan Skarsgård. At the very least, I will be like a reliable supporting actor in big Hollywood films. And I think it just reads like he cannot divorce the potential this movie had in its head from
And its
what it ended
failure.
up being, which is
It's just
understandable.
disappointing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's doing, everyone in the movie is like doing pretty good work. Like
Also-
they're like the guy that plays Wait, is that the guy that plays the bully wolf, or the guy that plays his
That's
friend?
the guy that plays Beowulf.
And the
Like,
guy who
Coolidge
plays-
is Beowulf.
The guy that plays his friend was also, again, I kept being like, I feel like this should be populated with like actors I know from Dogma 95 movies, and like I
Yes.
didn't know anybody.
No, it
Dennis
is
Storhoy.
surprising that you're not like recognizing people. You go to their IMDb's and you're like, oh, I guess I have seen that guy in 10 things, but
But,
none of
like,
them immediately
yeah.
jump.
Obviously, it's a lot of
David's leaning in.
I'm doing George and Seinfeld.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, like because it's a dark movie, but I was kind of like, oh, Antonio Banderas is in it. And then I was looking at the cast, I'm like, well, Diane Venora, okay, well, I love her.
For sure.
I'm sure she'll be all over this thing.
Kind of.
She's like
a little.
in
Couple
5
scenes.
shots,
Yeah.
Right.
maybe.
And then I'm like, and then who else do they have? They have no names I know.
Sharif's gone from minute 7.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
even the fucking Hobbit movies
Yes.
make an effort to have them be visually distinctive in a
Yes.
way that you can. Now, obviously, that's set in a fantasy world. I understand. This is going for like, no, these are real Viking warriors getting on a ship. They're going to kind of have the same vibe.
But they're dark
But then
and
I'm-
muddy.
And then
And
I'm
covered in
lost.
blood. I just
Right.
cannot keep track of these guys. Yeah, and you're surprised they're not guys you know, especially when as you watch the movie, you're like, Banderas like sinking down to third lead of this film.
Like I said, because he's playing an observer,
Yeah.
he often is relegated to like watching stuff happen. Yeah, kind of boring. Like
he never has the hero moment where he,
goes off,
lifts the sword and
half-cocked
saves somebody.
right.
Yeah,
Well, also in a film where they don't care about casting a Spaniard to play a Muslim, you're almost astonished by their commitment to casting like guys who actually are kind of Nordic to play the Vikings.
totally.
Rather than just putting, whomever in there.
I think-
Casper Van Dien or whatever.
But I think that's
you know?
partially because of the language. They wanted people that were speaking that language
Right.
at the
Yeah.
beginning of the film, which goes in again to the one
The one
memorable
cool
scene.
moment.
Yeah, which is memorable enough that I keep referencing it.
I mean, let's try to dig into the
Yeah.
plot of this. But as we said, it
Yes.
starts with this. I bet you're wondering how I got here. I'm on a ship because I fucked the wrong person, right?
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
basically.
basically.
I basically I slept with the king's wife. I mean, it's not the king; it's like the
Mhm.
caliph.
Yeah,
But so I've been appointed an ambassador to the Volga Bulgars, who were like these sort of like multi-ethnic sort of Slavic state up, the Volga River. You're getting more into like what is
closer
now
to Turkey
Russia.
and,
Yeah.
Mhm.
In the Caucasus or whatever. So like I'm going up from the Middle East, to whatever, the Central Asia / Europe. And there I run into a bunch of Norsemen, right? They fight off some raiders and he starts hanging out with the Norsemen, right?
He gets enlisted because of the witch or the seer there says, you're about to embark on an adventure and you need the titular 13th warrior. There's 12 of you. You need one more.
You think
and
we need 13.
and
So
they're
you
like-
think we need 13.
It truly is that.
Yeah.
Where she's like, okay, like we're hearing that King Hrothgar, and then everyone's Beowulf sensors
Yeah.
start going off, is in trouble
Mhm.
up north. There's some monsters attacking him or something. And the wise woman, the sort of Bjork from North
Yes.
Yep.
character, is like, oh, well, for that, you're going to need a 13th warrior and he can't be a Viking. And they're like,
That's the funniest part.
Banderas.
Is she's like, you're gonna need one more warrior, and they're like, okay, Lars, you're off the bench.
Yeah.
She's like, no, he needs to be kind of a different type.
No, I there's more to the parchment, like the old Simpsons joke.
Someone with foreign sales appeal.
But it's going to be so annoying for him. He's probably going to drop out of Gladiator basically because of this. Like, isn't that why he dropped
That
out
is
of
the
Gladiator?
Wait,
wildest
really?
fucking part of
Who
this
was
movie.
Who was he playing? Gladiator?
Maximus.
The main character.
That
Seriously?
movie was built
that's
for
why
him.
He's
That's why they
the Spaniard.
Oh,
This is what's
no.
insane is that this movie starts with Antonio Banderas being like, I am a Muslim. And then Gladiator starts with Russell Crowe being like, I, of course, am a Spaniard. And it's because of fucking Banderas being cast in the wrong movie, which causes him to drop out of the right movie.
This movie goes down like 20 points from where already.
Yes.
Because
because of that.
But Crowe is so
Crowe's
good
so
at
good.
Gladiator.
Yes,
Like,
better
it's
than
not a loss,
Banderas would have
but-
been. But
I think so.
But for
catastrophic
him,
for Banderas.
for Banderas, it's like multiple demerits.
But the question is, I do think Banderas could have been good in Gladiator,
Uh-huh.
right? But like, is Crowe in Gladiator the alchemy that makes it this like out of nowhere hit?
Sure.
You know,
I
like
think-
is Banderas in Gladiator another medieval flop that only hurts his standing?
I think Gladiator doesn't win Best Picture if Banderas is in it. It's not that level of hit. but it absolutely would have helped his career.
Well, the other
in a
thing is
way.
like it would have inherently had this one not gone over budget, it would have come after this one, so it would have been like the second Antonio Banderas Sword and Sandals movie, which would have automatically hurt it.
Right.
Sure, but it also probably would have stopped this movie from going over budget.
That's
It's
true.
like if they had just given up and said like, fine, put it out there, let him go do Gladiator, this movie is half the flop that it would have been otherwise.
Right.
Also, this same year, Crazy in Alabama comes out,
Yes.
which is the
film he
one
directed,
movie he
obviously.
directed with Melanie Griffith, which is
Right.
also a flop. It's like,
But he's untouchable.
I agree, but it's just funny where like 98 people are like, you know what? We get it. You finally made sense of Antonio Banderas. We all get it. He's Zorro, perfect vehicle. And 99, he's just like stepping in shit. And
Right.
people are just still kind of charmed by him.
I just like, because he's so personally charming
Mhm.
and he's so talented,
Mhm.
he's sort of indestructible. He's been associated with lots of flops. It doesn't really matter. He always bounces back by doing usually something like Shrek or Spy Kids or something where he's not even the lead.
Yeah.
Like, but then when you look at, like, he's made more bombs than hits in Hollywood,
Yes.
right? Like, his hits in Hollywood are what?
X versus Sever.
Obviously, X versus... No, it's like, okay, so it's like Desperado was basically a hit.
If we're talking like him as the guy
That's what
in
I'm
live
saying.
action,
That's what I'm saying.
Zorro,
obviously.
Desperado.
I'm not counting Spy Kids.
No.
I'm counting Once Upon a Time in Mexico, even
Yeah.
though Depp sort of helped that movie be a bigger hit at that
Mhm.
moment, I guess. And then it's like Puss in Boots.
Did Femme Fatale do well?
No.
No.
X
and then
versus
it's like,
Sever, a bomb.
right, like the bombs, like Assassins was a bomb, right?
Yeah.
13th Warrior, Play It to the Bone was kind of a bomb.
Original Sin?
Original Sin
Huge
was a
bomb.
bomb. People
Take the
hated
Lead.
it. Femme Fatale, which is a great movie to be clear, but
Yeah.
X versus Sever. Legend of Zorro, everyone hates.
Yeah.
Take the Lead. Great call. What the hell is that? It's like a dancing movie?
Yes.
Sounds pretty good, actually. Border Town, fucking Thick as he's done like the straight to DVD stuff.
Right. Now
like,
he's done a bunch of weird Redbox thrillers as well. And then he'll like pop into Uncharted, Indiana Jones, Doolittle, playing a sexy pirate.
have you seen Naiad yet? No, I mean you haven't.
No, I'm
You're excited to watch that. On
weirdly
Netflix,
excited
right.
to watch it. I will have seen it by the
So
time this
in
episode
Naiad,
comes
she
out.
wears this like suit, this like rubber
I thought
suit.
you were going to tell me Banderas is in Naiad.
I know.
No,
That's what
I
I was-
wish. You can do it, Naiad.
You must
coach.
swim.
It's that away. In Naiad, she wears this like rubber suit to avoid being stung by jellyfish while she's swimming in the open ocean, a totally
Okay.
normal thing that she does.
Yeah.
And my friend referred to it as her Skin I Live In suit, and I've not been able to dismiss. It truly just looks like that.
He's so good in that.
He's amazing in
Yeah.
that. That's the other thing. He'll go off and do an Almodovar movie
Mhm.
and just get like 5 more years of cred from one of those.
Yeah.
Like,
And also varying tones of emotive art, because like he does like The Skin I Live In, which is like very heightened and
fucked up and weird.
but then
and-
also do these incredibly emotional ones.
and Pain and
And-
Glory is like one of
Yeah,
my
exactly.
favorite screen performances. He's in Doolittle. Is he the villain in
He's a
that?
sexy pirate. I've never seen it.
I have seen
You've
it,
seen
and
it
I don't
multiple
remember
times.
if he's I think he's the villain.
But like when Shrek 2
Although
comes
the big
out,
villain is a dragon that needs to fart. That's
Right,
the thing.
constipated
in Doolittle.
dragon.
Right. Yeah.
when not Doolittle, when Shrek 2 comes out, people are like, "Oh, of course, we all love Antonio Banderas. We have always loved Antonio
Yes,
Banderas."
that's what I'm saying.
It's like this guy's made flops for
you guys
5
aren't
straight
showing
years.
up for him. Yeah. And then he does like Cat Zorro, and you're all like, give
Of
this
course.
man, let's change the Constitution so we can elect him president.
I guess the other thing I'm forgetting is in between Shrek 2 and the run of flops that start with this, basically.
Yeah.
He does 9 on Broadway, and everyone's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, fuck,
Which
right,
he's-
this guy."
That's an incredible thing. I listen to that all the
But
time.
it was that thing of just like, right,
I would like
God,
to
he
go
can be
here.
like funny and
I
sing
would like
and
to go
dance.
there.
Was he ever considered for the movie? Or was this post?
I was so furious. No, it's pre the movie.
They announced
It-
it,
the-
with Bardem,
The revival of 9, they did announce it with Bardem,
and then
The-
Daniel Day filled in.
which is insane. Like that they were like, "Do you want to do it, Daniel?" He's like, "Oh, sure, yeah."
You have 2 weeks to prep, and he's like, "I probably got it."
But like the revival of 9 that Banderas did was what kind of
Yes.
made that a hot property again. And of course, the original version of 9 was
Raul
with Raul
Julia,
Julia,
right.
and Antonio Banderas does kind of take the torch from Raul Julia.
Yes.
as the kind of like pint-sized mega good actor, sex symbol,
Like smoldering.
Million-watt
who can
charisma.
also kind of
Yeah.
do anything.
Yeah.
Like if you need him to drop to like support, fine, he'll do that too. But like the problem, I guess, is that he's so handsome and charming that Hollywood's like, but you need to be the star of action movies.
Yeah.
And when he's in the Expendables, it's like, yeah, he belongs here. He did a bunch of movies with guns and stuff. But you don't really think of him as like a Dolph Lundgren or a Jean-Claude Van Damme.
No, like Desperado aside, it's like his worst work.
All his bad stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
What if he was playing... Well, I was going to make a joke, but actually I don't know if he's X or Sever. Is he X or Sever? Can anyone answer this question?
In Expendables 3, what do you?
No,
are you
I'm just inexpendable.
Oh,
like what?
oh,
but
sure.
like, but is he's X?
I think he's X,
Okay, he's X.
which of course is spelled ECKS.
of course.
Who X vs. Sever had a notable director.
Chaos.
Chaos. That's right. Yeah.
KAOS.
A Thai director whose name is like Wich Chaosananda. You know, he has a longer name, but I do love that it's directed by Chaos.
Do you ever hate that we know this shit? That all three of us were
No,
rushing
I
to
think
pull
it's good.
Chaos.
Do you remember that movie? It was a horror remake where the director was a mysterious character who only wore a mask.
No, what movie was this?
What movie is it? It's a
Like
it's
he
a
was
remake.
like Daft Punking it. He was like, I'm not taking it off.
It's a remake of it with it's a Killer Kid movie remake with Vanessa Shaw in it, and the director has a mysterious name and apparently only wore a mask on set.
On set, it wasn't just for press.
The Mystery of the Masked Director, Come Out and Play is the
Yes.
film. So Vanessa Shaw and Yvonne Moss-Bachrach. Wait a second.
Wow.
Wait, I love both of them. His name is
Makinov.
Makinov.
And it is his only credit. He is credited as director, cinematographer, editor, sound department, producer, and writer. Jesus.
But Vanessa Shaw, though, I love her.
Yeah.
She's great.
Okay. So Banderas is drawn into Beowulf, essentially.
Right. He's
Like-
drafted into Beowulf.
Right. It's like, okay, chapter 1 of Beowulf, but we need a 13th guy. Banderas, you're in. He's like, oh, okay. And so they are going to go to the far north to fight monsters.
Mhm.
But we've got some great fish out of water stuff. He's got an Arabian horse. They give him a bunch of shit about that.
The
He's a
horse
little
is
horse.
too small.
Right.
It's too clean.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. He's not as sort of mucky and gritty as them.
Mhm.
But then in probably the best scene in the movie, as you say, he's like, I know your language.
Mhm.
And they're like, how? And he's like, I've been listening. But like, what
It's a really well shot, well edited, well mixed, and well performed scene. And it looks now like I'm watching it like, oh, they shot this all in one night or whatever. It's like it's really compressed and not hard to figure out how they did it. But I just remember being so taken with like the progression of languages, and because it's not just English and whichever Scandinavian language, which I don't know which the actors were speaking, but then there's Latin mixed in too because his buddy speaks Latin, and that's how Omar Sharif communicates with them. So it's the mingling of all three of those and the rhythm of it. And like watching it now, I was like, yeah, I see why this stuck with me because it is an incredible, symphony of linguistics that culminates in a really good line delivery from Banderas where he's like, I listened, which was a great line delivery. And it was like, that scene in of itself is great. And I like movies about communication. I like when communication and language come in. I don't speak any other language because I'm just terrible at learning them.
Language of film.
Yes. I have studied language. I studied Latin. I studied Klingon. I've love reading memoirs of translators and about how the art of translation works. And this scene kind of like encapsulates in about a minute and a half the way in which the brain can adjust and learn to hear sounds and apply meaning to them. And so anyway, long story short, I love that scene. I still think it's a pretty darn good scene.
Right.
And it is not a reason to watch this movie, but if that scene exists on YouTube, which I'm sure it does, I would recommend it.
But it's also like the last scene in the movie that's like that.
Yes.
Yes.
Like after that, he's just kind of in the club, and then it's just like, okay, now we are going to fight people in bear costumes in various locales.
Well, even the filmmaking,
together.
like there's the scene where he sharpens his sword to make it in the Arabian style or whatever,
Right.
which is shot poorly. Like it's like a very long lens, like from across a football field, and then they just do like a series of jump cuts, and it's just like,
well, they're at a football game.
yeah, exactly. It's and I was like, oh, like what? That again, I was like, was this a different director doing this?
Right.
scene?
Well, because like
Right.
McTiernan's peak is one of the all-time great anamorphic directors. Is so deliberate in his camera placement at all times, and I think there are some quotes in the dossier, but like he was saying, like, look, like Michael Crichton's a very literal-minded man in the way he conveys information.
Right.
Or maybe it was Ulrich, the actor, saying like the difference between their two styles. But yeah, that it's like, the difference between trying to find a way to evoke something and convey something versus feeling the need to like directly explain it, point it to you. And I think Crichton was just very literal with everything.
Right. Which makes sense because that's his approach to filmmaking.
Right.
Like, even in the good movies, you kind of like them because they're not sensational.
He makes movies to serve his own stories.
But they
Yes.
they have a
He directs them rather to protect his like screenplays.
Like Westworld and Coma are kind of straightforward, even though they're about ludicrous things.
they're fantastical, but they have a lack
And
of
that's kinda
imagination.
cool.
Yes.
Right, but like the incongruity
Yeah.
of that is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like Westworld truly is like, fuck, the robot's shooting at me. Like, like it's not like too grand about it. It's like, what if the fucking robot shot at you?
This movie needs to be pulpier.
It needs to be
work.
pulpier, and it needs to be scary.
Yes.
Because
It needs to be
the
scary.
antagonists are never scary.
No.
Nor are they
And they should be.
nor are they interesting.
No, they're
Like-
nothing.
And the book does a little bit more. The book is presented as a historical document,
Right.
that has been translated, and so it's full of footnotes and like notes from translators about the various meanings of what the original author, Banderas' character, may have meant, or what it actually may have happened.
That's cool.
And then it has all these appendixes at the end describing. It goes more into
Love an appendix.
the history of the Neanderthal and about how
Cool.
the Eaters of the Dead
Are like descended from
they're-
them somehow?
descended from the Neanderthals, and also how long the Neanderthals existed as a species before they eventually died out, like alongside
right,
modern man.
Right. We used to think it was like they were there, we come along,
Exactly.
they're gone really fast. But
Yeah.
it's like, no, they kind of limped around for like thousands of years.
They were like Quiznos while Subway was still going strong.
But what this needed,
Didn't those all close? No,
fantastic comparison.
they're actually still around.
Yes.
what this needed was more like pulpier is the right way to say it, because like
Yeah.
the creatures should have been like The Descent. And there's so
Yes,
much
yes,
of
yes.
this movie that is similar to The Descent.
Right.
And you're watching just being like, why am I not as scared of like
That's That's
even getting to the throne room? It's like Banderas is like, no man could have done this. And you're like, actually, it's just a pile of skulls. It's not that scary.
yeah.
Whereas in The Descent, you're just like looking also at a pile of skulls with a matriarch of an underground society. And you're like, this is utterly terrifying.
I think Sims is going to sigh an exasperated sigh in a moment because this is a movie I invoke a weird amount.
Okay.
Lowry, have you ever seen Season of the Witch?
The Nick Cage one.
Yes.
I would never say it's Season of the Witch because I like Season of the Witch.
I forgot you'd actually seen
Yeah,
it.
I'm pro Season of
It's,
the Witch.
I think, really good. I
Yeah.
defend that as some of like the most sublime trash of the last 10 years in this sort of space.
Yeah.
But like, I want the elevated McTiernan movie of what I think that movie accomplishes.
Right.
But that movie has the thing of like, we are real knights in a real world. We're butting up against something that feels supernatural. And a lot of the movie is like, is that
Is it or isn't it?
possible?
Yeah.
Right.
To what extent is she actually a witch or versus, no.
Right. And Season of the Witch comes down a very definitive way at
Yes.
the end of it. But like, right, even if this movie wants to, in its foundation, say, these are things that will get translated and transmuted over centuries in storytelling into supernatural creatures, perhaps they are terrifying humans, you want them in practice to occupy a middle space. Or just make them fucking monsters.
Or just make them
fucking
There's
monsters.
the part where they're like, the fireworm is coming tonight. And you're like, cool, the fireworm.
Can't
great.
wait to see a firework.
And then it's just hard cut to a line of people holding torches.
Yes.
And it's just like, you could have had both. You could have had this vision of this nightmarish vision coming over the mountainside. And then it turns, I remember in Throne of Blood, the Kurosawa movie, all the trees coming forward is terrifying.
Cool.
And then you're like, oh, it's just people carrying trees.
Right. But this is exactly like, I would love to see a movie that actually communicates, right? Like, imagine you're a Roman soldier,
Right.
you make it to Scotland, and these like giant blue painted naked people charge out of the woods at you.
That feels
And you're like,
supernatural.
it's
Yeah.
aliens, like
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah, exactly. We found monsters up
Yes.
here.
Right.
It's like, no, they were just these crazy warriors. But like even Braveheart or whatever, any of it, like doesn't really capture. I want something that does that.
And it's just wild for how much money this movie costs. And it's on screen in the sense that you're like, wow, huge sets, so many extras, so many props and costumes or whatever. But you're like, this thing's shot 3 times basically. You have 2 reshoot units going on at the same time. And no one's like, hey, maybe hire Greg Nicotero and come with a couple cool looks.
Yeah.
Right.
You need like the head orc.
Right. There's like no iteration of this where people are like, do we need more than a guy wearing a bear?
I think David needs to make this movie. But like just the idea of like,
Lowry, you
okay,
need to make this.
first 20
Unfortunately-
minutes, horny, Arabian warrior
Mhm.
gets in trouble at the court. Okay, that's fun.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Start us off with some, some of that.
And in
Antics.
fact, feel free to make it 40 minutes.
And
Yeah.
and he should be like peacocking, right?
Yes.
He's like really like the big man on
It
campus.
needs to be like Sorcerer. We had this entire movie before the
Yes.
movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then okay,
You think
he
it's
gets
just a horn dog
Yeah.
comedy.
now you're getting exiled. You got to go up north. Okay, he goes up north. He runs into Vikings. The Vikings are different. You stick with that. That's fine. He gets roped into this journey,
Mhm.
and then they're like, "Yeah." So it's like King Hrothgar, and anyone in the audience who knows their shit is like, "We're going into Beowulf." And then yes, I want them to go into. It can be real. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be monsters, but like
It needs to feel.
right,
The
like
audience
like
needs to buy into the
like
the
they're going
characters
into
think.
Vietnam or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's like I don't understand. Like all the rules of combat are different, or what just like we're fighting an enemy we don't understand.
I kept
Yeah.
thinking
Instead, it's like we're fighting an enemy that's big
Right.
and in a bear suit.
severed heads can be really scary.
Yeah,
Like I remember
I'd like
in
to
Sicario, maybe where like they just are. I mean, this is like unfortunately very true, but just like using the display of severed heads to instill fear in one's
Yes.
enemy, and it's really chilling, really unsettling. And these are monsters who take people's heads, and they never show up again.
Yeah.
Like I was like, what a missed opportunity.
And once again, I'm watching this tired, stressed out, distracted. Perhaps my comprehension was not at its peak,
sure.
but there was the moment where I went, oh, that's supposed to be Grendel.
Right.
And he
Wendell
had
yes.
been on screen for many minutes
Right.
at that point.
Right. There's cool ideas like this Venus figurine, like the famous, ancient Venus figurine.
all truthful, all pulled from
Right.
history.
And they're like, that sort of represents the mother of Grendel, Wendell, whatever, But I just feel like the back half of this movie is a bunch of people fighting in caves and dark forests and shit, and you can see the action,
And there's not. I mean,
but
aside
like
from
you just don't really feel a lot of tension.
yeah,
Yes.
aside from the death scene that I mentioned earlier, there's like nothing climactic about the movie. Like when they finally behead the head Wendell
Yeah.
or whatever, it's like you don't even really notice it happen.
No.
And you're like, and then they just start retreating, and you're like, oh, okay, it's over.
Also, a movie like this where you got one big star above the title, face on the poster, most of the cast are international actors you don't even recognize, right? You're like, this is going to be the narrative of, oh, he actually was the hero. Right. You assume there's going to be some element of like, he was the one who really slayed Grendel, or Beowulf was kind of an idea more than he was a hero, or whatever the fuck it is. And you're like, no, he just basically from minute like 35 retreats into just standing around, also being there, watching shit happen. And it's like, he does nothing to drive the story.
No.
At a
Well, at
point,
the end, they say thanks.
they say thanks,
They're like, good job, you were there.
and he prays to Allah.
And he says, he's like, tell my story. Like is at the
Yes.
end, Beowulf says like, draw sounds. That's draw my sounds
It
or whatever.
makes sense if you're reading the book and it is told by him.
Yes, but there's so little of that going on here.
Right, that you're like, he is the least active character
he's
for a
like-
guy
he's a
who
Nick
is
Carraway or
fighting
whatever.
for an hour and a half.
This is the problem with these adaptations often. Like, of course, the genius of Jurassic Park is it jumps from character to character, right?
Yeah.
So there's no one who's just there being like, day 4 at Jurassic Park, things getting bad, like. But like when you have the Nick Carraway type guy, like in
Yeah.
all the great Gatsby movies, are like, what do we do about this character who just watches everything happen and then is like idly thinking about it later? Like how do I represent that in a movie?
But it's also easier to do that, even though, yes, that has been the issue of every dramatization of Great Gatsby. It's like, well, you just need to have another actor stand next to him and listen. Even if it's not exciting, he feels present.
Yeah, he's
Whereas
there.
if you're in a battlefield, everyone's swinging swords, you're like, well, it's hard to have the guy who's the observer and the listener
Yeah.
just be like in the middle of chaos when no one's talking.
And also not participating.
Right.
Really, like a little bit. But I feel like I'm a little more positive on this movie than you guys. There's like 4 scenes I like, but the real test when I was watching was like, if you were channel surfing, this was on TNT, would you stick with it?
Mm-hmm.
I am not hugely. It's like a 5 out of 10 for me. Like,
Yeah.
it is not a movie where I'm like, what an embarrassing bum.
Yeah.
And it is not a movie as I thought it was going to be, where I'm like incoherent,
Yes.
clearly just so
Sure.
fucked with that you can't even figure out what the movie was supposed to be. Like Crichton is saying, he's like, my cut isn't that different. It's just like, it's probably the difference of a few minutes, right? Like,
Yeah.
but that's the problems are, more in the adaptation, I
Yeah.
think. And, just like from the start, they're kind of working with the wrong angles.
I like it less than you, but there are elements that grab me in the same way. But it's just one of those movies where the whole time I'm watching and I'm like, this should rule.
Well, I can't.
Right.
It's like one of those movies. Like I like it a little bit here and there, and I've got fond memories of it, especially that one scene and the ending. But I couldn't quite recommend it unless someone was really into seeing Vikings or adaptations of Beowulf, or that all of the contextual things that, or McTiernan wanting to be a completist, which I'm assuming this movie is about to get a large bump, like a bigger bump than it's had in 20 years.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll get at least a bump.
Yes,
right.
exactly. And
Some numbers are like something are blinking at like the Disney, touchstone office in the back.
14th Warrior greenlit?
It's
like lots of complaints about the image quality.
Mac, you remember to update the HD. Oh yeah, I'll get right on that.
Previously, it was just a ViewMaster reel
Hey,
uploaded to iTunes.
Is this iTunes? Wait, I got something for you.
But it's really interesting watching it also as like the last epic of its sort, because there's aside from there's like a visual effects department in the credits, but I couldn't tell if there's any CG other than the boat, like at sea.
Yeah, at sea, that's right. Like, and those things could look better, although it's kind of cool seeing.
It's still
splash
cool,
around.
and it doesn't look that much different than boats at sea now. Like that's what it all looks
It's still
like.
hard to do that, right?
But it's a very analog movie.
Yes.
And it has that, which again I associate with McTiernan a lot, is like that sort of starting in the 80s when film stocks became more naturalistic, but so the style came from how you lensed it.
Okay.
Like you're not doing digital DIs yet. You don't have the telescene controls beyond the red, green, blue, or cyan, magenta, whatever.
Please keep going.
And so it's got this very analog style that's very naturalistic.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you, just to use another Viking movie, to use The Northman as an example, it's so stylized because you have these new tools at your disposal. Directors are able to put that look, that patina. Even Lord of the Rings, a few years later, which has a lot of the same scenes. Like a lot of the same content of like monstrous creatures attacking people in a wooden fort.
These guys are basically orcs. Yeah.
Going into a cave that is full of skulls.
Right.
And you just see the way in which modern filmmaking, in the space of like just a couple of years in that case, took a big leap forward and allowed people to represent these images with a different sort of style.
Well, McTiernan's also one of those guys who's like, my visual inspirations are from fine art.
Yes.
I'm not inspired by other movies.
Yes.
Right? And like the transition point is happening already and is going to just become complete basically after him, where you have very few people whose like way into movies isn't movies.
Very true.
And aren't sort of like using the language of what they know and what they love and what they've come up with. And it's not like this movie is particularly painterly, but you do see him thinking about it visually in a way different to how like Ridley Scott does when he makes these types of movies, or Jackson or any of those people. The movie I kept on thinking of that at times I felt like it was evoking some of the feeling of, it's a movie I prefer, but Verhoeven's Flesh and Blood.
Sure.
Yes, I prefer
Which
as well.
similarly feels like I want to actually like be here.
That movie's also very bright. Like
It's mostly during the day.
It's more during the day.
Yeah.
And it has a sort of unhinged quality
Yes.
that obviously is present in many of Verhoeven film. And this does not have an unhinged quality. Like
Right.
the Vikings in this are pretty serious warriors.
Yeah.
Without the humor is mostly like your horse is smaller.
But that's a movie where Verhoeven talks about mostly being inspired by Bosch paintings and being like, I want to make a movie that feels like the
Do
art.
the voice.
I want to make a movie that feels like the art of the time and the way putting that on the screen instead of our modern perspective. Also, they are all Nazis.
Flesh and Blood is a better film.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
I love
I
that
do
movie.
too. What are some other comps though? Because like this definitely isn't.
Northman is the most modern
Well,
version
Northman's
of this.
incredible.
Right.
So when you say the film stocks got better, like what does that mean?
Well, they just got more. You needed less light, for example.
Right.
Like let's go to Lawrence
The
of
actual
Arabia,
speed of them.
which
yeah.
was also a completely photochemical movie. Any David Lean movie to use if we're going to draw connections because of Omar Sharif, you would have had, the three strip process. Then then in the 70s the film stock got a little faster, and by the 80s it had a very distinct look that we kind of associate with that era of filmmaking.
Right.
And it extended
Glossier era.
glossier, but also you didn't need as much light. Like you just literally could shoot more naturalistically.
It's why you think of like 70s horror movies being so grainy, because they're mostly the films that are set at night.
Yep.
That couldn't work around it on a technical level, find some creative way to shoot day for night or whatever it is. And so it's just like stocks being pushed really hard.
And then into the 90s you have that. And then at late 90s you get into, I guess O Brother is the first full DI.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden that toolbox is available and everyone takes advantage of it.
Right.
Within like 2 years, it becomes de rigueur.
The way to make movies.
Right.
And so you don't get movies that look like this anymore, both because you don't shoot on film. If you do shoot on film, the stock is different. You don't have film stocks that look like this anymore. The lens technology is now advanced. Everyone's like, going further back in time, getting retro lenses. And everyone wants a movie to look like, I think there's so few directors now who have the modesty, I would say, to have a film that doesn't have a signature style to it.
Yeah.
And McTiernan's movies are so robust and so strong, like such strong direction, but
he's
he doesn't-
never been this is a McTiernan.
Yeah,
picture.
he doesn't
You
have
can
a
tell
signature.
because I'm snapping this filter
exactly
on,
or like a Spike Lee dolly shot, for
Right.
example.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think we talked about this when we did the episode. It will have been months ago now. But Dead Reckoning Part 1, maybe now called Dead Reckoning Part Only.
Dead Reckoning Part. Don't ask any questions.
End of sentence. Felt very McTiernan-y to me.
Yeah.
And then I've listened to the 15 hours of Macquarie doing Empire podcast breakdown stuff.
Yep.
And he's just like, I'm not riffing on anything. I'm not referencing anything. I think that style is often like a crutch or a gimmick if it's recognizable on a very surface level. I'm like just trying to break down what do I need to convey, what I need to emotionally, narratively in this shot, in this sequence. Like it's all just sort of problem solving for me, and I'll do whatever I can to get there. And I do think McTiernan has a similar approach, which results in that movie having a similar style to his, where like so much of the quiet genius of McTiernan isn't his action sequences. It's like the way he makes dialogue sequences as exciting as the action sequences in his action movies,
Right.
without doing crazy Michael Bay. I'm just going to keep the camera spinning and 1,000 lights and filters, just like flash, flash, flash kind of stuff.
So much of what we, all the great moments from Die Hard are actually not even the action. Like the ones that are cited the most are not even the action scenes.
Yeah.
Um,
But that does make it all the more frustrating to watch a movie where the cut has been taken away from him to some degree. Because even if it doesn't feel wildly compromised or like there is a secret masterpiece there, you're like, I just want to watch the guy unfettered.
Yes.
I want to watch him try to tell us how he thinks this can be conveyed. And when anything's interfering with that, it gets hard to pluck it out.
what is your favorite McTiernan? Are you a McTiernan fan generally?
Probably Last Action Hero.
A very David answer.
Very David answer.
I
You
mean,
should
that
remake
movie-
that as well.
That movie was a huge deal to me.
Yeah.
So
And
how old were you? You're like a couple years older than me.
Yeah.
Maybe. We're similar ages. I was 8 when that came
I
out.
was
No,
12.
7.
I was
Yeah.
12 when it
Okay,
came out.
okay. You're I was a little too young for it. I was not versed enough in Schwarzenegger at that moment to really get it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I had not seen the requisite Schwarzeneggers yet
Well, it's also
when it comes out.
look, we will have done the episode, but the weirdness of that movie is like it's them doing the parody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
both of them,
Right.
and they're riffing on themselves basically.
I remember
Right. Can they get away with that? Yeah.
Right.
I remember buying into it so much that I thought the Hamlet was coming out. Like I thought that there was going to be a Schwarzenegger Hamlet. and
there
I didn't
should be.
realize there should be.
Yes.
And it's not too late.
That's what he should do now. Have you guys
Yes.
We've fucking talked about Schwarzenegger so much.
I've seen everything I have not yet seen the movie, the doc.
Oh, it's
It-
so good. That's
which
what
I've
I was
heard is
gonna ask.
good. Yeah. But I've just been enjoying his press tour.
His Conan episode's incredible.
His Conan episode is excellent. Just
Well,
I
I'm
just
just-
really want him to have the Sly in
That's
Creed
exactly
Mhm.
what
performance.
exactly.
I
what
think
want to
he
say.
is so capable of it.
Yeah, and I don't even need it to be prestige-y, by the
no,
way.
not at all.
But I feel like so often when he does step off the bench and act in something now, you're like, shouldn't this be a bigger deal?
I think he leans too memey in the
He does.
like stuff he picks, and I don't know if that's his people's fault or whatever, but anyway, I'm gonna tell you something off mic about this. But I just want him to do something like that. Or he does like this thing like Aftermath. That's like that movie that's like
Yeah.
fairly sincere.
Which, like, right.
Which is like not
paper.
bad,
Yeah.
but maybe just needed a better, whatever, more sort of like oomph behind it or something to really get across. I don't know.
I just,
love Barney.
all this recent press, I'm just like, there is some sort of pathos that he feels like he is more in touch with now
Yes.
that someone needs to harvest.
The wealth of perspective that he has in all of his myriad careers and viewpoints and
Yes.
everything, and the fact that he's emerged from Scandal or
It
just
is
everything. It's
wild how candid he is now, and candid in a way that is like very self-critical.
mhm.
Yeah, he can be self-critical. And yeah, I don't know, like I just feel like I'm
But
the
what would
Sly doc is kind of the bad version of the Arnie doc. I know you probably haven't watched it.
I haven't watched the slide doc yet. No,
It
because I
has
got
interesting
that vibe
stuff
from
in it.
Yeah.
But there's so much it doesn't want to talk
Yeah.
about.
We will-
Then it's just
I
like,
just-
and then in the 90s, I kind of lost it. And I'm like, no, buddy.
Yeah.
Slow this down.
Yes.
We just did so much on Rocky and Rambo. We need to talk about the 90s.
Movie
He's
by
like,
movie.
I don't know. Then I tried with Copland, and then we're like, and I'm like, no, we're not jumping to Copland. Like, we're not doing that. And then they can't talk about Creed at all because, like, he'll just
Right.
start ranting.
Yes.
So it's just not in it, really. And
So
anyway,
wild.
what were you?
What
gonna
would
say, David?
Schwarzenegger's Creed be? Would it be something
Is there an existing
Yeah.
thing that you could make a
'cause
legacy sequel to?
It would be Conan.
Hmm. Sure.
Which he still vaguely threatens to make. I mean, he's recently restarted that conversation.
Conan is not the most sympathetic character.
No.
Conan.
But there's the King Conan. I mean, the ending of Conquer with him sitting on the throne
Yeah.
and the sort of what now
Yeah.
vibe has been this long promise of like, can you make the sad old Conan movie?
And weren't the
Conan.
Wachowskis going to
Yeah.
do it at one
Yeah, at
point?
one
That
point,
that
yes.
was a concept. Yes.
And then it sort of got killed by the Momoa version. And then the last year or two, he's been like, I might actually want to do it. I mean, I think he's very good in Terminator Dark Fate.
I do too. I just think that he's tried every version of going back
I'm just
there.
realizing we're talking this much about Arnie.
we're
We
probably-
will have for the last 4 months gone through McTiernan, Schwarzenegger, and the Terminator
We're doing-
movies on Patreon.
Yes.
Terminator on
Hold-
Patreon.
Wait for that.
Yeah.
I mean, the Seventh Day.
No, I think it has to be something new. I mean, it's not prestige-y in the way that Creed is, but like there was the rumor that Cameron was going to have Schwarzenegger be the human villain for the Avatar sequels.
Right.
Oh, that
And
would
there
be
was
great.
something so exciting about like, using old Arnold.
Yeah.
And like suddenly
That
having
would
him
rock.
be an energy
I'm
guy
sure it was
versus
just-
than a physical
But
guy.
I'm sure that conversation was like, okay, Arnie, so you ready to live in New Zealand for 2 years? He's like, what? I'm not doing that. I have all my llamas I must feed every
he
day.
loves these fucking llamas.
They come into the house. My wife left
in
me
fairness,
years ago.
yeah, you
I
can't
just
bring
feed llamas.
your pets
That's
to New
the thing
Zealand.
he keeps saying is my
They keep
daughter
them
buys
out.
the
They keep 'em
llamas,
out.
and then she doesn't want to take care of the llamas anymore, so now I have the llamas.
We must stop Trump. Wait, excuse me. These llamas, they're hungry again. The 13th Warrior. Do we have anything else to say about the 13th Warrior before we move on to the release of the 13th Warrior? Beowulf dies, succumbs to the poison of Grendel's mother. And like literally it's just like, oh, by the way, thanks, Ahmad. Like, you let him know about us, right?
Yeah,
And Banderas is like,
right.
10-4.
Right. And you've sort of like forgotten because he's gotten so lost in the shuffle. The movie then ends with them all saying goodbye, Muslim, and then him delivering a voiceover outro saying praise Allah. And you're like,
Yeah,
right.
a loyal
he was
servant of
supposed
God.
to be fucking Muslim
Right.
this
He
whole
is.
movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But apparently Disney was, as you guys mentioned, basically like, cut as much of that as you can out.
Yeah.
And they probably were like, well, we can't cut it out right at the end. And they're like, fine, but lose it wherever you can.
Yes.
Um,
There's almost nothing else I want to say other than that. I do like the callback to the funeral when they're all about to go into battle and they're all acknowledging they're about to die. And it was a line I remember that Omar Sharif has, which was, he's like, "You will not see this again. It's the old way when the funeral happens," which is clearly an ADR line, but it's maybe one of the only good instances of post-expository ADR actually benefiting the movie. I
was about to say, it
hate ADR.
You have a real axe to grind about ADR.
It drives me crazy. I've been guilty of it.
Sure.
Sometimes under duress. And I despise it when you have actors back to the camera and you're just putting dialogue and like it.
But like, and I also obviously bad ADR always clangs off the backboard when you see it or whatever. But like, you're a filmmaker, so you know it immediately. You know it, right? Like your eye is twitching the second you see it in any movie. I assume 90% of audiences are like, "Huh? What do you mean?"
Totally.
Like,
they wouldn't.
Right. Yeah.
They wouldn't.
But the vibes are weird, even if they could never call it out.
It's like, oh, I should be seeing someone's face right now, shouldn't I? Yeah.
It can be done inoffensively. I don't know about well, but when it's done badly, it's so awful.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I guess my just final thing is, I think this period of Omar Sharif where he's just like, I can't do these fucking bullshit movies anymore, right? And then even like post Hidalgo, he sort of like quiets down for a couple of years. He's the narrator of Roland Emmerich's 10,000 BC. And there's the other one, what is it? There's the sort of like biblical epic he does, One Night with the King, where it just feels like this final decade of his life is people being like, we want to rent the the automatic like credibility of Omar Sharif in our sort of like throwback
touch of prestige
epic. And every time, aside from just killing his soul, you're like, the last thing you want to do in this movie is remind us of Lawrence of Arabia. It is such a foolhardy move to put him in there and then have you just immediately draw the comparison to like, wow, they really don't make him like they used to. Huh?
Yeah, it's instantaneous in this movie. It's like a bunch of people and horses cresting a hill and Omar Sharif is there and you're like, not as good.
And it starts with him. He's irrelevant and discarded so quickly, but it just sets the tone in your mind of like, I immediately now know what this movie is failing to do.
Right.
It's front of mind. I'm not going to forget it.
The film was released on August 27th, 1999. August 27th, where great movies like live. Although, wait, wasn't The Green Knight released around then, or am I making that up?
It was
a March.
It was like late July.
Late July is far different from late August. Have you ever had a late August?
I've had a mid-August.
Pete's Dragon was a mid-August surprise.
But that mid-August, there are gems there. Late August is usually tough.
You can't do the last weekend, and now weirdly the first weekend of September has become a good weekend because of it.
Right. Yeah, and like Barbarian and like, there's usually some fun horror movie lurking there.
But like last weekend of August is just the one Doom weekend. That and first weekend of January, I feel like.
Dumped in theaters August 27th. No premiere.
Right. No premiere, no press.
No press. Thomas Crown Affair had come out 3 weeks earlier.
Where is it in the box office?
It's 6th.
Okay.
It's 6th.
What's it up to?
It's made $50 million. It's doing just fine. And on its way to 70.
What is 13th Warrior opening to?
Well, it's opening to 10.
Okay.
On its way to 32. So it actually kind of
legged it out.
I mean, legged it out is too strong, but at least it held.
What's crazy now is like a failure then still makes more money than a failure now.
Yes.
Right.
Right, because that movie today would drop off to 2 in its second weekend.
Exactly.
You could see that movie being like, you're right, it's 68% drop, and then third weekend they're like, we're getting this out of theaters. Like, like it's going right to VOD or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's another movie dominating the box office.
Sixth
right
Sense.
Now. Yes, Sixth Sense. So
it was number one.
Not to spoil the box office.
And how long did it have left as number one?
Sixth Sense has been number one for 4 weeks and is going to be number one for an additional week before Stigmata comes and knocks it off.
Ironically, in its 6th week, or was that the 7th week?
In its 6th week.
Wow.
But who released The Sixth Sense?
Touchdown.
Hollywood.
Well, okay. Buena Vista.
Disney.
Yes.
Same thing.
Yes.
Correct. And so they're kind of like, we're in the money, baby. And like 13th Warrior comes out like, yeah, who cares? Like, we're in the money. Like, they're happy.
Well, and Sixth Sense also just like a notoriously thrifty production where they got Bruce Willis for like a heavy discount.
Yeah.
That movie is so insanely profitable for them, and it's just rolling and rolling and rolling that, yeah, it's just so funny that like Disney's basically covered their losses from this movie, and McTiernan has done the same with the movies that released 3 weeks earlier.
Right.
And McTiernan must have been doing press at that point.
For Thomas Crown.
And they're like, oh, so what about this other movie you got coming? And he's like, what?
Don't talk about it.
What movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. Like, Kulich, of course, once again, the one source on this movie basically said there was no premiere. It was heartbreaking for all us fucking giant Viking guys, right? Who worked hard on this movie. The only good review is Lisa Schwartzbaum, who weirdly calls it audacious, exhilarating, and wildly creative. So she dug it.
Loved it.
Everyone else basically negged it. And it was one of those things where even the reviews are like arriving with a high budget. You know what I mean? Like its reputation.
Yeah.
2 years on the shelf. Yeah.
Number one at the box office, Griffin, in its fourth week is The Sixth Sense. What's it making in its fourth week?
20?
$20 million. Because that's here's why you're guessing that.
It was
basically
making
made
20 every
20,
weekend.
20, 20. Right, yeah.
It like opened to 20 and just stayed there.
Do you like The Sixth Sense?
Love The Sixth Sense.
It's the best.
It's a fucking masterpiece.
It's the best. 13th Warrior, number 2. Number 3, opening to 10, as I said. Number 3 is a romantic comedy. In its fifth week, it's doing amazing business.
Runaway Bride?
Runaway Bride.
Yeah.
A film I have not seen since 1999.
I've never seen it.
Do you know about the FedEx joke?
I think so. What's the FedEx joke?
I don't think I've ever seen a line crush as hard as the FedEx joke.
Yes.
Where she jumps on a FedEx truck.
Yes.
Do you remember the joke?
I do. I saw it.
I
don't
only
remember.
know of this because of you talking about how hard it killed.
I just think of it so much. But she jumps, she runs away because is she gonna run? Is she gonna run? You know, and then she does.
Yeah.
And
she's doing the thing. Look at her.
Right. You know, she jumps in the back of a FedEx truck. Where's she going? I think Jolie Fisher. No, Rita Wilson. Sorry, I always confuse Jolie Fisher and Rita. So Rita Fisher's like, where's she going?
Rita Fisher, you said.
And Hector Elizondo, who is essentially the fucking, Shaquille O'Neal of
Carrie
Marshall
one-liners.
movies, where they're just lobbing it up for everybody. He's like, oh, I'm ready. Just deadpan says, I don't know, but she'll be there by 10:30 tomorrow. And like,
It's pretty good.
I just remember my entire audience basically like showering roses at the screen. It's so funny. And he crushed it. Elizondo crushed it.
Elizondo always crushed it in those movies.
He did.
That might be, David, that might be a 5-timer on the podcast. Even just hearing you recite it still gets me.
Oh boy.
Okay, so that's number 3.
Number 3. Number 4?
Blair Witch?
No. Blair Witch is 8.
Okay.
It's been out for 2 months.
I guess
has
Blair
made
Witch
128.
at one point did start dropping
Dave,
off.
do you like the Blair Witch Project?
Yeah, that's great too.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
This was the summer I graduated high school.
Right.
So
I was about to say, if I'm 13, you're basically right.
yeah,
You're 18.
so I was 18 when it came out, or the summer, and it was like a milestone summer, not just because 99 is famously, what is it, the best year ever, best movie year ever. Is that the name of the book?
Yes.
Yeah, and it was also just a pivotal year in my life. So like I saw every single movie that summer.
Yep.
And have fond memories of all of them because of where I was in life.
I just look at these box offices, even the flops like the 13th Warrior. I'm just like, yeah, we never had it so good.
Yeah.
Number 4, it's an acidic Hollywood comedy. A great film.
About Hollywood?
Yeah.
It's
also from Hollywood.
Bowfinger.
It's Bowfinger.
Oh, the great Bowfinger.
Which obviously was just a medium hit.
Yeah.
But enough of a hit, and I think enough of a critical hit, that everyone just kind of came out of that one looking good. Yeah.
And a movie that is, I find, so totemic for anyone I know who works in film.
I've been really
that is one of the great depictions of.
I haven't watched it in the past 15 years, so I really want to see it now, having been on more sets and experienced more. I just want to maybe I'll do that tonight.
It's so good, and Murphy is it's one of the best performances in the history of movies.
He's so fucking funny. Number 5 at the box office. We'll do it one day.
Bowfinger?
I mean, we might do Bowfinger one day. Frank Oz.
I'm gonna put on the bracket.
Yeah. But no, we'll do this film as a commentary one day because we decided to include it in a trilogy that it is not a part of.
Twinkle, twinkle.
What's it called?
Mickey Blue Eyes.
Yes.
Do you know about our Jelly trilogy, David?
No.
Have you seen Analyze This?
Yes.
You're familiar with
you
the
remember
character
Jelly?
Jelly, played by
Yes,
Joe
yes,
Vitarelli.
yes.
Okay, so Joe Vitarelli is also in Mickey Blue Eyes,
Of
playing
course.
a Jelly-esque character.
Yes.
So
we've decided.
Right. We made an offhand joke at one point that maybe we do analyze this and analyze that on our Patreon. So we could say we're doing a little this, a little that.
Right.
You say
Alex Ross Perry has loved that joke, held on to it for years, pushed us to actually commit to doing it. At one point, we were like, 2 just feels a little slight for only 2 movies. So we have canonized Mickey Blue Eyes, in which Joe Vitarelli
unofficial.
plays a very similar role as to our own Jelly trilogy.
We just have fun with Mickey Blue Eyes.
We would.
Who directed that one?
Mike Newell?
No, it's
No.
fuck.
Oh, it's a total rando. You're not getting
Really?
this. You're not.
Who is it?
Kelly Macon.
Okay, no, I was actually not going to get him.
No.
Were you about to say something about Mickey?
The
Blue
director
Eyes?
of Kids in the Hall Brain Candy.
I was
Oh,
gonna
wow.
I was gonna say that when you said Jelly trilogy, my brain instantly, before explaining it, went to like notable movies with jelly in them. And the first thing was Jelly of the Month Club and Christmas Vacation.
Uh-huh.
And this is all in the span of like the 2 seconds before you revealed it was actually the character.
Yeah.
But I was like trying to think of like, what other movies have jelly? What other movies have jelly?
Gosford Park has jam. I just rewatched Gosford Park yesterday. It has Tom Hollander eating jam in a jam closet. But
It sure
that's
does.
part of a jam trilogy. That
Yeah.
we'd have to split that into its own thing.
Number 6, Thomas Crown Affair.
Which I remember loving.
It
Like,
is
super-
so good.
And when you mentioned that McTiernan has a fine art point
Yeah.
of view, like there literally, because if I recall, he picked all the paintings that,
Yeah.
including, of course, the Magritte.
But also, that movie makes so much sense as the guy walking straight off of 13th Warrior. This movie still hasn't been released. And he's
Yeah.
like, I know I have like an atomic bomb that is going to get dropped at some point.
Fascinating.
I need to direct this next movie like my life depends upon it. It just has to be uncomplicated, like fucking home run.
Number 7.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of flops opening this week. So this is new
Well,
this week.
This is the weekend that started the box office game in our podcast is the Sixth Sense weekend, where Sixth Sense hits and everything else bombs.
Yes,
After a
exactly.
very
right.
big
Everything's
summer.
just kind of bouncing off the Sixth
Right.
Sense. And
August
into
was
the
like a
garbage.
dumping ground, and like you have the July movies staying strong. You have Sixth Sense killing it. Thomas Crown was the one that sort of surprisingly held, and then they're just dumping bullshit.
So I've never seen this film.
Mm.
It's a Michael Reimer film. I know Michael Reimer best because he worked on Battlestar Galactica.
Okay.
It's called In Too Deep with
Yes.
Omar Epps and LL Cool J.
Oh, sure.
Don't know much about it, but I think it's like Omar Epps is an undercover cop. LL Cool J is a gangster. It's kind of like New Jack City, but worse, I guess.
I have a very distinct memory of watching it, but it was like my memory is that it was like a year later. I'm shocked that it came out in 99.
I'm just picturing someone going into studios, and here's the pitch. It's like New Jack City, but worse. that was part of the sell
But
for the
you
movie.
know, good enough.
Right.
And then Michael Reimer went on to do Queen of the Damned, which I remember being like,
Wow.
like what a strange jump forward.
I mean, also just like why like hand that property? No offense to Michael Reimer,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
to like kind of a journeyman guy, like
Yes.
whatever. Number 8 is Blair Witch. Number 9 opening this weekend bombing is The Astronaut's Wife.
Mm.
Like a huge bomb.
Mhm.
Yeah,
like that
huge
movie
bomb.
was expensive.
Yeah.
Number 10 opening this weekend bombing is Albert Brooks's The Muse.
Oh, wow.
A giant bomb.
Yeah.
Pretty funny movie
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
memory. Like haven't seen it in years.
August almost used to be tax write-off season.
And number 11 opening outside of the top 10, Dudley Do Right
Yeah.
with Brendan Fraser.
Right. Colossal flop.
Wow.
Giant flops everywhere.
But like in an era where the internet and internet fan culture is still so nascent, right? Is basically just Harry Knowles and
Yeah.
such.
Right.
At this point in time, you're like, if you just cram a movie that you know is a mess into the last 2 weeks of August, you can kind of like throw up your hands and go like, well, competition.
Yeah.
And you're like, your competition was other flops.
But like,
But studios would just be pushing 10 crappy movies into these
They
like
really
final
are.
corridors.
but how much did Dudley Do Right ultimately leg out to? Like, what was its?
It opened to 3, made it to 9.8.
So even a 3x
Yeah,
multiplier.
not terrible.
is
It
like-
left Black
opening-
Hat in the dust.
Yeah.
The Muse opened to 4 and made it to 11.
Okay.
Astronaut's Wife opened to 4 and made it to 10.
Mhm.
Not great.
No.
And In Too Deep opened to 4 and made it to 14.
Wow.
Word of mouth sensation. But then, of course, yes, you have The Sixth Sense, Runaway Bride, and The Blair Witch Project are just all massive, massive, massive hits.
Well, and also just 3 weeks later, like in the graveyard are Dick, Iron Giant, Mystery Men. Those movies are out of theaters now.
Mrs. Tingle was taught, but she did not learn a lesson.
She didn't learn her lesson.
Like you said, Iron Giant, Mystery Men, Broke Down Palace. Lake Placid, which wasn't actually a hit.
Yeah,
they kind of pretended it was.
Yeah,
and it's still still mentioned often.
But it didn't actually do well. No. Drop Dead Gorgeous, that was a bomb.
Yeah,
Too Dark, good movie to be clear.
Two dark dunst August comedies.
Obviously, Eyes Wide Shut came out a couple months ago and did okay for a 3-hour conspiracy thriller sex movie, but underperformed in a way.
But even listing all of these movies. And, in a way you could say it's puncturing the myth of 1999 as being the best movie year ever. But, I have fond memories of all of these movies.
Yeah, that's the thing.
They're all fine. Even if they're just fine or even if they're bad.
Do you have fond memories of Inspector Gadget?
No.
That movie
Deep Blue Sea?
Sucks.
Deep Blue Sea, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, 100% Deep Blue Sea.
The thing with 1999 is...
Deep Blue Sea is to CGI as the 13th Warrior is to, not CGI.
Yes.
Deep Blue Sea is can we just add some more CGI in this scene? It's going to look terrible. Who cares?
We can get away with it.
Yeah.
No, the thing with 99 is, you take out the masterpieces, it still just feels like maybe the last year where, inarguably, film is at the center of the monoculture.
Yes.
In America, right? It's not just one movie that's captured everyone's attention or whatever, but you're people were excited about the Oscar movies. They were excited about all these summer blockbusters. There was even interest in which movies were flopping. It was just peak kind of populist film culture.
And you'd go see all of them. The fact that the movie that opened outside of the top 10 still made it to over 10 million is people went.
It's this dumb stat I will throw out, but I've said this before. The Haunting and Sixth Sense were the only 2 movies between May and August that opened to number 1 and didn't make $100 million.
Wait, Sixth Sense?
I'm sorry, not Sixth Sense. Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
Right. Haunting and Eyes Wide Shut.
Everything else.
Haunting stinks.
Yeah.
Alex was trying to sell us on that not stinking recently.
He's developing
He was doing this to you too?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was kind of going Jan de Bont, disrespected. And I was no. As much as I love Speed and enjoy Twister.
The exact amount of respect he deserves.
Right. I don't think The Haunting stinks in my memory.
All I remember, I was telling Alex, all I remember is Liam Neeson getting drowned by a giant statue, and at that point checking out because ghosts shouldn't be able to do that. And I was I had a very logically, I was I can accept faces appearing in the banister or whatever, but I can't accept the statue in the garden grabbing Liam Neeson and drowning.
I was also saying, why is that guy directed nothing in 21 years? McTiernan, you're he went to jail. He had several flops.
He locked his ass up.
Right, I understand why he disappeared. Jan de Bont hasn't done anything since Tomb Raider 2. Not a commercial.
No, he hasn't, yeah.
He hasn't done a foreign film. He hasn't directed TV.
He may have just quit because he didn't want to do it anymore and he had money.
It's just fascinating.
He just retired to some Dutch farmhouse and was I made Twister.
It's opened a restaurant probably.
Right.
He's massively successful
I just
chef.
think with those guys,
all I want to do is roast squash for people.
Usually you find out he directed one of those Antonio Banderas Redbox movies, and it's depressing to know that that's what Jan de Bont's doing, and it's no, he seemingly just walked away.
Chillin'. I will say that unfortunately Alex's prodding on this has made me think, do I need to watch the only Jan de Bont I've never seen, which is Lara Croft 2, which I did not see on account of nobody liked it.
Yes.
So I always figured I had to skip that, but now I'm do I have to see that and make sure it's not a hidden gem?
Yeah.
Have you seen The Cradle of Life?
I saw it when it opened, and I watched the first 10 minutes on Netflix when it was on Netflix within the past 5 years. Because sometimes I just want to see what movies were like then. It's so crazy.
Yes.
Even
Let's remember.
That was 2002?
3.
Even the leap from then to now, it's huge. You look at the beginning of that movie and you're that's unreleasable.
That's making me want to see it more.
There's this big earthquake sequence.
Yeah.
And it's very cheap. It's nowadays would be giant CGI cracks in the earth just splitting open and cities falling in. And in 2003, they're still just shaking the camera a lot.
Hell yeah. Again,
long lens camera shake.
How to Rent, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, The Cradle of Life. Now there's a colon and a hyphen movie.
Yeah.
Because
it's colon
Lara
after-
Croft, Tomb Raider,
Right.
hyphen the Cradle of Life.
Right.
They didn't have the guts to just call it Tomb Raider.
Mhm.
Both of them,
Yeah.
It was only the Vikander movie where they're finally like, we think you know what Tomb Raider is.
Drop the Lara Croft as
Right.
cleaner.
Yes. The 13th Warrior. Yes, obviously, like the next film we're covering is Rollerball.
Mhm.
But in a way, the next film he made was the Thomas Crown Affair.
Right.
But obviously, this came out after.
This is a bit of a tenet
Yeah.
in terms of release order.
It almost feels unfair to
Yeah.
do this after Thomas Crown because Thomas Crown is the one that lingers. And indeed, I was like, I thought it came out.
And it's his response film.
Yeah.
To at least the experience of making this.
Rollerball is a film I have never seen.
Same.
Again, didn't see because at the time the word was skippable.
Yeah. I was like excited to see it.
Me too.
And everyone was like, you cannot,
You can't go.
you can't
You're not-
allow.
You're not allowed to go. Did you see
I saw Rollerball
Rollerball?
and I saw Basic,
Mm.
which I thought it was inverted. I thought Basic,
Basic is the last one.
the last one.
Basic I saw on a
But those
DVD.
are the same year as well?
No, it's 2002 and 2003.
Okay.
I mean, who knows
Yeah.
when Rollerball was actually released? Like maybe. No, yeah, it was. But Basic I saw on DVD in like the Adirondacks on an 8-inch television. I have no memory of it at all. I know it has a twist.
I always get confused between Basic, General's Daughter, the two Travolta military movies, and then one
Rules of
other
Engagement?
Rules of Engagement. Yeah, they all kind of have combined.
Those
in my
three
head.
and the Friedkin movie, The Hunted.
I see. There's a chain there.
are
I had
all in the
I
soup
confused
for me.
I
Rules
had
of
a
Engagement and The
whole-
Hunted.
I had a whole angle that I was going to talk about how if McTiernan, if Eaters of the Dead had been successful.
Oh, we're going to swap everyone around and it'll be good? Oh, no,
Yeah.
okay.
no.
all right,
If Eaters of the Dead had been successful,
And was
like,
released under that title.
yes, and
Yeah.
McTiernan could have gone on a similar path to what Friedkin was doing in that era, because
Right.
he started to do really interesting things
Mhm.
following the failure of Jade
Mhm.
and getting the chance to make things like
Well, after JD does Rules of Engagement and The Hunted.
and The Hunted's great. Well, my memory
Both of those movies are good.
is that's great.
And both of those movies are him taking like a pulpy, mediocre Hollywood script and doing some cool things with it with amazing actors.
And The Hunt is another one of those movies where one man dies in front of another, and my favorite trope.
Yeah.
Yeah. A man sitting down to die and his peer / enemy / friend watching and maybe holding his hand. I
Have
don't
you
know.
ever done this in one of your movies?
I haven't, because I've always been trying to do the opposite, which has been like, this person's not worth caring about. So like Ain't the Body Saints was all about Casey Affleck's character thinking he'd have that type of death
Yeah.
and being like, actually, no, you're not worth it.
Yeah.
And then Peter Pan, same thing. It's like, actually, you suck.
like, you don't even have a lot of deaths in your movies now that I'm thinking about it.
No, I mean, Green Knight sort of again is also a counter to that. Takes you right up to the moment of death, and that one worked, I think.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah,
It's a good movie.
But yeah, I'm always like, for better or worse, being like, how can I puncture the mythology rather than like embellish it?
Right. But maybe you should do this.
But maybe I should embellish the
maybe-
mythology.
maybe you
like maybe
need-
that's what I've been missing.
You need heat,
Yes.
Heat, of course, the ultimate example of two men reaching out to each other is one dies.
Yep.
In
It's
my
the best.
opinion, it's certainly
It's
where
the best.
my brain goes.
Yep.
Just throw some Moby in there, over
God,
it.
moving over still waters.
Yeah, exactly. But it is funny to think, Friedkin's little 2000s run there is interesting. It's kind of like when Coppola did The Rainmaker and stuff.
Yeah.
Where he's like, well, let me just do this. And you're like, hey,
Yeah, but
I like that.
Rainmaker's end the line for it.
It is, I know.
That's
It's only if Jack was good.
Right.
But Jack is like, no one could
But
be
Jack's
that good.
before
It is,
Rainmaker,
correct.
right? Yeah.
But like if only, if he had like three in a, obviously wearing
I'm wearing a
Bram
Dracula
Stoker's
shirt,
Dracula
yeah.
shirt today. Like if Coppola had like three solid.
That was my surprise in watching Rainmaker for the
How
first
dare you
time.
be surprised? I've been telling you that movie's good
I know,
forever.
but I'm like, this movie is like a reawakening for him. This doesn't feel
Right.
like
How
for
did it
hire
not
work.
lead to more?
And then
Right.
his response to that movie is great. I'm out of debt. The wine's selling.
Right.
I don't need to make another movie for 9 years.
That chair's got my name
Yeah.
all over it. I'm
I'm
gonna
out.
sit.
Yeah.
Oh man, you should do not the whole. Well, you could do the whole career,
We
but
could
just
do the whole
do
Coppola career.
do like the four, like Youth Without Youth, Tetro, Twixt, and then Megalopolis.
Yeah.
The four self-finance. Well, he's
See, I
self-financed
think
lots
you
of
gotta
movies.
do all of them.
You gotta do one from the heart. Yeah.
You gotta
I
do
think
all
we would just do all of him and smush the first 4 into 2 episodes, right?
Yeah.
Or even 1 episode. No, we can't do that.
Finian's Rainbow, Rain People.
So it's Dementia 13 and You're a Big Boy Now are
Yeah.
obviously going into 1 episode.
Yeah.
And then I think Finian's Rainbow and the Rain People could probably be in 1 episode. And then he made this movie called The Godfather. After
Godfather.
I mean, after that, you're in great territory. Captain EO goes on Patreon. You do the New York Stories on Patreon, right? That'd be fun if we ended up being like, we're gonna do New York Stories on Patreon, 2 out of 3.
Well, I was gonna say we do it Twilight Zone the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Way.
We're like,
Style,
we're gonna do
like-
every part of this but 1,
except for the 1.
Yeah, he'd be good.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that Megalopolis.
Oh, boy,
Very
am I
excited.
I hope it's good.
Yeah.
I hope it's just, I don't think it will be, but I just don't want it to be like the Gilliam Don Quixote movie.
Yes, where like everyone was like, oh,
Yeah, where it came
that
out
came
and I
out?
was like, this is a C. Like, how could that be?
I mean, we'll never stop talking about how weird it is that movie is not great.
It's
But also-
available to watch at any moment. and
Not a
no one would
disaster.
ever. Yeah, we were like, it's actually all right, but
how
not
long?
that good.
How long between its release, after its release, did you see it? Because that was the other thing. I was like, oh, it came out. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
I should watch that.
I think I saw it at a screening because I was like, well, I gotta see it. Like, I've been waiting for this movie my whole life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll go see it. And then I saw it and I was like,
Also, if you have a passion project you've been trying to make for 20 years, the key is Adam Driver.
Yeah.
that is true. Yep. Ferrari. Is there a third one?
Megalopolis.
Well, Megalopolis, right.
Yeah.
65. They were trying to make that for 25 years.
It was originally 45.
Did you see 65?
No. See, this is the problem, Lowery, when you come on the show is we don't see you enough. So then the episodes get this extra 40 minutes of us being like, what else? What else?
Yeah.
I saw 65 in Germany,
Really?
Okay.
and I saw it in German because most movies there are dubbed.
Yes.
So you have to seek out the English
Yeah.
language screenings. And I was like, Adam Driver versus dinosaurs. Like, this probably
How
works
much
pretty well.
dialogue are you
Yeah.
going to need? Right.
And
Should be a
actually,
gentleman's 6.
It actually was great.
Yes.
Really? Better,
Because-
maybe?
And so then I reached out to the directors to
Mhm.
say, hey, saw your movie in Germany, had a great time. And they were like, the movie was written to be in an alien language. And it was going to be 100% in an alien language with no subtitles.
No subtitles?
And that's
Holy
what
shit.
we all set out to make. And right before shooting, Sony was like, you have to do it in English.
I just imagine some guy in a chair at Sony going, what? Huh? Like
So they-
waking up and
so they were
taking
like,
the hat off.
What's all this?
They were like, you 100% had the better viewing experience. And you saw it the way
Wow.
we intended because you didn't understand what anyone was saying.
That is interesting because I do think that movie would function better, right? As just like the broadest emotional strokes. And that's interesting to hear. Wow.
But they might not want that out there. So
Yeah, maybe we cut that out.
just a long, sustained beep.
That would be funny if you're like, I saw 65 in Germany. Beep! Just for like 2 minutes. And then we're like, at the end, we're like, wow, that's crazy.
Interesting.
And then everyone's like, what was 65 like in Germany? Was there something different about it?
I won't stop thinking about what you just said.
All right.
Larry, thank you for being here.
It's been great to be back.
You gotta come back sooner.
Yeah.
You've been busy and there was a pandemic,
Yeah.
but you gotta come back sooner.
Yeah. And I will, last time I was on, I left that night, went to go see Moulin Rouge with
Mm.
Alex and Anna.
Oh, sure. And on Broadway.
Yeah, on Broadway. And then at the intermission, I checked my phone and there was a phone call saying, cancel your plans tomorrow. We have to have a green light meeting because Disney wants to make Peter Pan.
Right.
So I'm curious what's going to happen tonight.
Right.
Wow.
What will get lobbed your
yes,
way.
exactly. Like what good or bad decision I will make in the next 24 hours. And so there's a lot of potential out there.
Wow. Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. Cars reboot. That's what they're going to pitch.
Yes,
Cars
exactly.
4.
Yep.
But whatever it is, Forky's going to be in it.
Guys, if
I'm
you
sorry.
don't know this,
We have to acknowledge it quickly. Last time you were on, we're talking about Forky. I go, Forky's a star. People should put him in more movies. You go, I will do that.
Right. So Green Knight had not yet been made, or
We'd made it, but there
went
were
back for
still a couple. We
reshoots.
did like 3 days of pickups.
Pickups, yeah.
And I made sure Forky was in those pickups.
It's unfortunate that Robert Redford doesn't like eat with Forky at a diner at some point. That would have been fun.
The only reason to go do a special edition of The Old Man and the Gun
Has
would
to
be
put the forky in his mouth.
Well,
Exactly.
also you could change all the guns to walkie-talkies.
Yes.
It's a subtle reference to E.T.
but don't change the title.
but
you
not change
never-
the title.
We didn't publicly acknowledge this for years, and you would text me from set, and you were like, "Here's the new Forky the art
Right,
department's whipped up."
I have a
Right. So in Green
medieval
Knight,
Forky and a pirate Forky
Right,
yeah.
somewhere in
in
my
Green
inbox.
Knight, there's during the puppet show, one of the children is holding
Yes.
a medieval Forky.
Can you see it?
It-
you can
It's
see it.
very small in the frame, but it's
Yes.
like dead center.
But
I have
Peter
a
Pan,
blown-up
it's
picture of
like in there a fair amount.
He's
Peter
the
Pan-
sixth lead.
Peter Pan was on set a lot.
Right.
And one of the Loth kids was carrying Forky around a lot.
There's
and was,
one sequence where he's in like
and
multiple
we shot
pieces
so
of-
much like
yeah.
it's a kid that has like lots of little jokes. And so
Yes.
we'd always like just like have a response to this. And we shot way more that has a lot more Forky in there. But Forky he peeks
Is
out.
Forky in your new movie?
And Forky will be in the new movie.
Because you've been texting me about like going through the design stages of how Forky will fit into the next
Yes.
movie. You've committed to this thing 100%.
I do think you should make a future movie so there can be some kind of like cyber Forky.
Oh,
I'm trying to
totally.
think of like other kinds
Totally,
of Forkies.
yeah.
But
that
the
there could
funniest thing
be.
was like someone on the Reddit posted like, because people will be like, I just listened to this episode from 4 years ago. Was this thread ever picked up? Right. And this is after Peter Pan had come out, Peter Pan and Wendy. And they were like, Lowery made this joke about putting Forky in all these movies. I guess he never lived up to it. And I texted you and I was like, am I allowed to tell them? This feels so annoying that no one's found it.
Right.
And the guy's sniffing. And I just posted and I was like, he's in there. He's in both of the movies.
And in
And
Peter
not
Pan
only-
it's hard to see, but
But if
Green Knight,
if you know what to look
there's
for,
one spot to look
It-
at.
Yes.
You can.
Yeah.
Is Tony Hale aware of this?
No.
Wow.
Do we want to make him aware?
Yes.
I feel like he should be.
You should.
I feel like we can tell him
Yeah.
somehow.
it's not
One of
speaking
us
roles. It's not like he's
can like
losing
rub sticks
work,
together
you
and
know?
find some
Yeah, it's not-
connection to
yeah.
Tony
Yeah.
Hale.
It's a tribute.
It's
Yeah,
Tony
I mean, we
Hale's
know
good.
Tim Simons.
Yeah.
Tim, hey, you're in your car right now, probably texting us via Siri, which is what you do when you listen to these episodes. We get texts from Tim like, Griffin, did your mom like me when I was on the podcast? Sent with Siri.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, you had to say that aloud, Tim. So yeah, call Tony if you're friends with him.
The other thing with Tim is this morning he texted us something that sounded like a huge insult was coming.
Right.
And it seemingly was just him being nice, but every sentence he said ended with a tone that felt like it was going to be followed by
Right.
but.
Like, it was like, guys, I really like listening to you talk about movies and I'm glad we're friends.
Yeah.
And I thought he was like, but he never
right.
said it.
And
He
then
was
the
actually
next
just
text
being
was
nice.
like, I think you're very nice and very smart. And we were like, what's this hammer you're holding? The most cutting thing is about to come down on me.
all right.
Okay.
All right.
David, you're the best.
Thank you.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I had to take that.
Lowery, you're the best.
You are.
Thank you for being here. We'll have you on again sooner.
Thank you for being here and thank you for volunteering as you always do. Well, not Sleepy Hollow so much, but This and Truth About Charlie to take the movie no one was really, like pumping for.
But I didn't say to you, here's what's still in play. I
not
said
at all.
McTiernan is on deck, and you said 13th Warrior is a
This was
film.
the one that I would be like most excited to rewatch right
Yeah.
now.
No, it fit perfectly. Thank you for being here, and thank all of you out there for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you to Marie Barty for our social media, helping to produce the show. Thank you to Ben Frisch for jumping in today.
You're welcome.
We'll call you back in when we do Warriors of Virtue
Yep. Got to now. That's
Inevitable?
on the books. Yep.
on the spreadsheet. Thank you to Leigh Montgomery and the Great American Novel for our theme song, Alex Barron and AJ McKeon for our editing, JJ Birch for our research, Pat Reynolds and Joe Bowen for our artwork. You can go to blankcheckpod.com for links to some real nerdy shit like our Patreon, Blank Check Special Features, where we do franchise commentaries. If you liked us talk about Arnold for 5 minutes, there are now 5 episodes of that.
Yep.
So that's a thing you can listen to there. Tune in next week for Rollerball.
Yeah. And as always.
And as always, I wish Forky had been in the 13th Warrior.